Chapter 25. Right now, there were flames everywhere in the experiment hall. They were all caused by the explosion of a laser gun. Sadler was extremely annoyed. This Ding Meng was extremely cunning. As soon as he turned the muzzle, Ding Meng would either hide behind the control panel or throw the laser gun at him from afar. After the first experience, Sadler didn't dare to fire recklessly. This Pioneer power armor was a very old first-generation product. It had a lot of functions, but it couldn't withstand large shocks. He also didn't understand why the higher-ups designated Black Gold Base to use this stupid thing. Right now, he didn't dare to fire recklessly. Even if he did, it would be a waste of energy. Even if he rushed up, he wouldn't be able to hit anyone. The synchronization rate of the first-generation power armor was nothing to be proud of. Plus, that kid was extremely fast. He might as well rush out and do it alone. The system started again. Damage to the body, 34%. Energy reserve, 35%. Main gun needs to be recharged. Time to recharge is Motherf asterisk Kerr. Sadler was too lazy to listen anymore. He kicked open the hatch and jumped down from the power armor. "You little bastard, get the hell over here," Sadler roared. "Little rascal," said Ding Meng, "don't waste time with him. Their people are almost here. I'm detecting more and more energy fluctuations. They'll be here in 3 minutes." Ding Meng didn't want to waste time with Sadler either, but he knew that if he wanted to leave this hall, he had to get past Sadler. Leopard Machine Gun and the others were either fierce or cunning, but they were all just labor leaders. But Sadler was different. This guy wasn't just a mercenary. He was the leader of the mercenaries. He had secretly observed Sadler's actions many times and studied his habits and patterns. He was waiting for this kind of critical moment to respond. And now Sadler took out a syringe gun. With a click, he stabbed his arm. The test tube on the gun quickly injected the red liquid into his body. Little rascal couldn't help but ask, "What is he doing?" Ding Meng's expression was very serious. "He's injecting himself with the steel mixture." Little rascal said, "Don't we have it too?" Ding Meng coldly said, "Ours is completely different from his." As for how it was different, Ding Meng didn't have time to explain to her. Sadler's combat boots stomped on the ground, and he immediately rushed forward. This step alone covered a distance of 5 or 6 meters. He then punched out with his right fist, and the sound of wind breaking could be heard as his fist moved through the air. The power of this punch was several times stronger than the leopard from yesterday. With a "pa" sound, Ding Meng received the punch with one palm, but his other hand was unable to chop out because Sadler's punch was a feint. Sadler's other hand had already reached under Ding Meng's armpit and lifted him up. Then, using his back to twist in the opposite direction, he threw Ding Meng's entire body onto the ground. If an ordinary person were to fall to the ground, even if they didn't die, they would at least have a few broken bones. Fortunately, Ding Meng borrowed the force of the fall and flipped in the air, landing steadily 5 meters away. Little rascal said, "This guy is pretty good at using the army fist." Ding Meng naturally didn't know about the army fist, but he was very clear that while ordinary people could sense origin ability users, they would also frequently practice various fist and leg techniques. Little rascal had also explained to him before that it was a martial technique. Having a martial technique and not having one were two completely different concepts. To put it bluntly, it was a fight between an orthodox martial artist and an unorthodox martial artist, so they had a natural advantage. However, these were all secondary. What was important was that Sadler had been injected with the highly condensed steel mixture. His strength, reaction, speed, resistance, combat ability, and so on had all been greatly increased in a short period of time. This was the most troublesome part. The steel mixture used by the laborers was a low-end product. At most, it would make you overdraft your physical strength for 10 or so minutes. It was completely incomparable to the high-end products used by the mercenaries. Sadler was a bit surprised when he saw that Ding Meng was standing there perfectly fine. This time, he changed his fist into a palm strike. Ding Meng didn't dare take it head-on and quickly dodged to the side. As soon as he dodged, the miniature heat gun on Sadler's wrist shot out an energy bullet with a bang sound. The bullet practically hit Ding Meng's chest at the same time. Ding Meng quickly stopped, stood still, and leaned back. This was the oldest Iron Bridge move. In reality, it wasn't much of a move. An unorthodox martial artist would be able to do any difficult move in a moment of crisis. However, when he stood still again, Sadler's whip had already flown in front of him. There was simply no time to dodge. Ugh! Ding Ming let out a muffled groan. Although he reached out to grab the whip, the front end of the whip had already coiled around his neck a few times and was currently tightening. It was as if his throat was being choked by a pair of iron hands, and he couldn't breathe at all. Even though he had observed Sadler's moves many times, he still didn't think that this guy would be able to use the whip so skillfully. "Where's the thing? Hand it over, and I'll spare your life," Sadler roared. Ding Ming's right hand slowly reached into his bag and took out a small and exquisite black box. He threw it in front of him. Sadler sneered and said, "This again? Do you really think I'll fall for the same trick twice?" This was the box that the exchange center gave to the workers to store the nutrient solution. How could Sadler not recognize it? However, Ding Ming's next move shook Sadler's confidence. This was because he slowly raised his right leg, as if he was going to crush the box with his foot. "Don't you dare!" Sadler was both shocked and angry, and he charged forward. With his attention distracted, the strength of the whip weakened quite a bit. Taking advantage of this momentary gap, Ding Ming suddenly raised his right hand, and a claw blade appeared. A dark golden light went straight for Sadler's throat. This was another desperate attack. It was either you die or I die. Unfortunately, this time it was a throwing knife, and the distance was a little too far. When Sadler saw the strong light coming at him, he didn't have time to dodge. He simply twisted his neck and actually dodged this fatal attack. With a clink, the claw blade hit Sadler's shoulder armor, but half of the blade still went into his shoulder blade. F***CKU. Sadler was furious. He endured the pain in his shoulder, and his right arm exerted strength again. The whip tightened again, and this time it dragged Ding Ming's entire body back. TSS, TSS, TSS. A string of white energy suddenly shot out from Sadler's glove and traveled along the whip like an electric current. It instantly spread throughout Ding Ming's body. This was the energy chain. Anyone who was hit by it would lose all ability to move. No matter how much he thought about it, Sadler's whip looked like a whip, but it was actually a technological fiber. Not only could it not be cut by normal weapons, it could also conduct energy to control the enemy at critical moments. Ding Ming felt that his whole body was bound by another kind of force. It was as if a stream of air had entered his pores, and his body was completely paralyzed. After all, he was still a beginner origin ability user. He didn't cultivate any secret techniques, and he didn't have any martial arts techniques. His body could only store energy, and it hadn't undergone any changes. He was still an ordinary person's body. Thus, when he was pulled over, he couldn't withstand Sadler's heavy blow. Pong! The fist accurately hit Ding Ming's chest. Pooh! Blood spurted out from his mouth like rain. Chapter 26. When Sadler hit Ding Ming, Little Rascal instantly calculated the result. Ding Ming's current weakness was over 50%. 2 of his ribs were broken. His heart, lungs, liver, and spleen were all injured to varying degrees. The force of the punch had even affected his stomach, intestines, gallbladder, and other parts of his lower abdomen. Before Little Rascal could finish calculating, something unexpected happened. When Sadler raised his second punch, his entire body suddenly flew up, as if a pair of invisible hands had grabbed his buttocks and pushed him into the air. With a whoosh, Sadler flew towards the giant screen in the middle of the hall. His head smashed into the screen, creating a spider web-like crater. Little Rascal looked over. Not far behind Sadler, Little Four had at some point appeared under a control panel. Both of his hands were holding a black trumpet-shaped pistol. This was Leopard's gas gun, probably a machine gun. He never thought that when he threw it to Little Four on the cable bridge, Little Four would actually have the guts to secretly pick it up again. He had been hiding it on his body all this time and brought it here. It came in handy at a critical moment. In this black gold base, the slightest bit of carelessness could lead to fatal consequences. The gas gun was a type of weapon that didn't have any direct killing ability. Its principle was to compress high-pressure air into a ball and shoot it out, creating a shockwave effect. It was also a weapon that mercenaries often used to deal with laborers. Those who were hit by the gun would die on the spot. Those who were hit by the gun would naturally be able to withstand it. Sadler clearly belonged to the latter. However, this collision caused him to see stars. When he was rebounded by the screen and fell down, his pupils suddenly contracted. This was because Ding Ming had already broken free from his shackles. He rushed over like the wind and used the classic carp leaping over the dragon gate, backhand chop technique. Up until now, this was the only move he knew. However, this move was often a killing move at a critical moment. In reality, Ding Ming wasn't aiming for his neck this time. Instead, he was aiming for his shoulder. The claw blade was still stuck in his shoulder blade. Ding Ming's proficiency with this weapon was like a part of his body. The moment his hand came into contact with the handle, he quickly grasped it tightly and pulled it in the opposite direction without any hesitation. Tisich, a large string of strong electric sparks appeared, and the shoulder armor was completely cut open. The claw blade did not stop there. Just like the machine gun, the strangely twisted blade pierced into his neck like lightning. Bang! Sadler fell heavily to the ground. He felt something cold dig into the right side of his neck, making him feel as if there were thousands of little bugs crawling in his throat. It was unbearably itchy. He couldn't help but curse out habit. Motherf asterisk cur. Unfortunately, he could not curse this time. Ding Ming would not give him a chance either. He twisted his wrist and pulled hard again. TSK. The only sound that could be heard in the experiment hall was the sound of blood spurting out. Sadler's neck had been cut open, and the incisions on his esophagus and trachea were so deep that no one dared to look directly at them. In this black gold base, he had sacrificed the lives of countless laborers, but today he had finally lost his life in the hands of a laborer. Indeed, a murderer would be killed by others. "Brother Ding!" Xiaoxi exclaimed and ran over. Ding Ming held his chest and struggled to get up. Run! In fact, even without his reminder, even Little Four had heard it this time. Countless mechanical footsteps could be heard coming from the tunnel behind them. It was obvious that the mercenaries were about to arrive. In the base command center, as the large force poured into the experiment hall, the communication screen finally recovered. The general saw everything clearly in an instant. At this moment, he had completely lost his mind. He stood up and roared madly. "Kill them! Kill them all! Kill them all! Kill them all! Leave no one alive!" More than 20 power armor's photoelectric guns and energy cannons fired at the same time. Countless bead-shaped energy bullets formed an airtight net that covered the exit, accompanied by a large number of white cannonballs. The scene was like a torrential rain mixed with large hailstones sweeping across the ground. It was like sand and rocks were flying, and the ground was shaking. The exit could not be seen at all. It had completely turned into a ball of light. The violent explosion shook the entire hall. The southern wall had completely collapsed. Large and small alloy steel plates were blown off and piled up into a metal hill at the exit. Ding Ming rushed in at the last moment before the exit was sealed. If he was a fraction of a second slower, he would have been blown to pieces. The whole world turned dark again. In the darkness, Ding Ming endured the pain and got up. He staggered forward, using the wall as support. The previous series of battles had depleted his stamina to the point where there was not much left. Xiaoxi. After Ding Ming took a few steps, he suddenly realized that Xiaoxi did not follow him. There was not even a sound in the darkness. What happened? Ding Ming quickly turned around and opened his telekinetic vision. He found that Xiaoxi was lying on the ground and could not move at all. His face was as pale as paper, and blood was gushing out of his mouth. "Xiaoxi!" Ding Ming shouted and ran back. He reached out to help Xiaoxi. Unexpectedly, Xiaoxi pushed Ding Ming's hand away. He gasped and said, Brother Ding, I heard that. When people die, can they remember a lot of things?" Ding Ming looked down and saw a piece of metal sticking out of Xiaoxi's chest. It was the vital part of the heart between the third and fourth ribs. Obviously, the mercenaries' bombardment had caused the flying alloy steel plates to penetrate Xiao Ci's chest from the back. Xiao Ci, pull yourself together. Ding Ming stretched out her hand to take out the cloth bundle. Little rascal's voice suddenly became low. Ding Ming, it's useless. Xiao Ci can't make it. It's hard to save him without a medical pod. As expected, Xiao Ci used all his strength to grab Ding Ming's hand. Brother Ding. Ding Ming also grabbed his hand. Xiao Ci, it's okay. You'll be fine. I can save you. Trust me. Xiao Ci shook his head weakly. His weak eyes signaled Ding Ming not to speak. Brother Ding, I remember now. My surname is Zhong. They call me Zhong Ci because I'm the fourth. That was the first time he said his name, and it might be the last time. Zhong Ci, Zhong Ci. Ding Ming lowered his head and repeated the name 5 or 6 times. It was as if he wanted to remember it forever. Xiao Ci said with a trembling voice, Brother Ding, my hometown is in Area 56 of the Linda system. Heavenly dream city of the immortal Weaver planet. Area C9, number 23, 11th Street. He slowly raised his left hand again. It was the brown bracelet. He always played with it when he had nothing to do. He valued this thing more than anything else. Not only did he always hide it on his body, but he also protected it tightly even when he was being beaten by machine guns. He cherished it more than his own life. But now, the bracelet was completely stained with blood. My sister, her name is Zhong Ting. She's the third. Xiao Ci coughed violently. She gave it to me on my 4th birthday. All these years, I've been carrying it with me many times. I felt like I was going to die, but I still couldn't bear to change it. Brother Ding, am I stupid? Ding Ming's eyes suddenly turned red. He finally understood why Xiao Ci always lowered his head and played with the bracelet silently. Because to Little Four, this was no longer as simple as a bracelet. This was the only thing that could comfort him in his entire life of suffering. It was the sustenance of his life, the support of his soul. For him to be able to bitterly hold on until today and be able to struggle at death's door until now, perhaps it was all because of this bracelet. Otherwise, he would have long died tragically in those years of wandering about. Ding Ming understood this feeling. He had always thought that he was a heartless person. Now, he knew that he was wrong. Some people could not change themselves no matter how much they changed. Brother Ding, Xiao Ci held his hand tightly again. You're an energy user. You have the ability. If I die, if you can get out alive, can you bring it back to my hometown and give it to my sister? Xiao Ci's breath gradually weakened. Looking at Xiao Ci's hopeful and trusting eyes, Ding Ming gritted his teeth and said word by word, Xiao Ci, please believe me. No matter how difficult it is in the future, I will definitely bring it back to your hometown. Unless I die. Thank you, Brother Ding. When he heard Ding Ming's answer, Xiao Ci finally showed a rare smile. Please tell her, all these years, I've been living well, very well. Ding Ming nodded solemnly. Xiao Ci, don't worry. I will definitely pass on your words. Thank you, Brother Ding. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Xiao Ci's voice was getting lower and lower, and his breath was getting weaker. In the end, his clenched hands slowly relaxed, and his weak eyes closed. The only thing that stopped was the last warm smile on his face, which was mixed with blood and tears. Chapter 27. The world was still dark. Ding Ming sat calmly on the ground in the passage. The mechanical sounds outside the hall gradually became louder and clearer. Ding Ming didn't move. Little Four's body gradually turned cold, but he didn't move either. Even though the pain from his wounds was unbearable, he still didn't move. It was because he didn't want to leave just like that. They had agreed to go out together, but this time he was still the only one left. He stared blankly at the bracelet in his hand. The blood on it had already dried up, but the blood in his heart didn't turn cold. Instead, it turned even hotter. His other hand suddenly trembled. The dark golden claw blade immediately flipped over into his palm. The blood on the blade had also dried up, but that was the blood of his enemies. The blood on the bracelet wasn't just Little Four's blood, It was the blood of the laborers. It was the blood of these lowly people. It was countless blood and tears, sorrow and pain, life and death. And it was the promise he had made to Ding Ming. He lowered his head and gently stroked the blade. The D character in the center of the shiny blade was especially bright. However, on the other side of the blade, there was another line of exquisite words. What fortune is there in gathering? What sorrow is there in parting? What joy is there in life? What bitterness is there in death? It was a short sentence, but it couldn't express all the feelings of life and death. Ding Ming was still sitting there. Her mind seemed to have drifted away again. Ding Ming, what kind of weapon is this carabiner of yours? Little Rascal saw that Tang Weilin was in low spirits and took the initiative to find a topic. It can even cut through mercenaries' armor? Ding Ming's voice was very calm. A very important person gave it to me. A very important person? Little Rascal's voice suddenly became much more excited. Is it a woman? No. Little Rascal asked curiously. Then it's a man? No. Little Rascal was puzzled. If it's not a woman or a man, then who is it? Ding Ming fell silent again. Little Rascal said dejectedly, Ding Ming, don't be sad. Little Four is completely dead, but it's not your fault. You've already done enough. I know. I'm not sad either. Ding Ming's tone suddenly turned cold. If I'm sad, it will only make those people more arrogant. Seeing that Ding Ming's fighting spirit had been reignited, Little Rascal immediately said, Ding Ming, you have to live well. Little Four's sacrifice wasn't in vain. He died for you. There was a murderous look in Ding Ming's eyes. He gritted his teeth and said word by word, I will not only live, but also seek justice for him. I swear. Little Rascal perked up. Yes, this is the image of Ding Ming in my mind. The reason your compatibility is as high as 100% is largely due to your strong will. Little AI has good taste in choosing you as a core gene body. Our main program, number 1. Ding Ming was too lazy to listen to her explanation. He got up and said, Little Rascal, let's go. Let's get out of here. Compared to the eternal darkness of the underground world, the command center of the base was bright all year round. It was already late at night. Julie stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the night sky. This room was a VIP lounge that the commander had specially prepared for her. It was decorated like a suite in a luxurious hotel, with all kinds of amenities. Looking down from the window, the square of the base was only the size of a palm. However, she could still see tens of thousands of workers lined up like a swarm of ants. After looking for a while, Julie closed the window. She turned around and walked to the wine cabinet to pour herself a glass of red wine. She really needed to calm down. Her position was not high, and her status was even a little low. However, it was because of this that the higher-ups had assigned her to this mission. Logically speaking, this kind of core, secret mission related to the overall situation should not have been assigned to her. However, the higher-ups could not have sent someone strong because that would have caused too much of a commotion and easily attracted the attention of the outside world. Why were the mercenaries in the black gold base using older equipment? Why did the main mining area not use intelligent robots to excavate? Why was quantum communication equipment prohibited? Why were all transportation vehicles small aircraft? Why were there no source strength warriors stationed here? All of this was because any trace of source strength jump or energy fluctuation would attract the attention of the outside world. This place had to be isolated from the world and was destined to be cut off from the outside world. Her mission was to control the situation to the minimum and retrieve the memory at the same time. Virus memory. The mission objective given by the higher-ups was only these 5 simple words. What kind of special virus was it? What kind of memory was it? Other than these 5 words, there was no other additional information. This was where she was anxious. After taking another sip of wine, Julie sat back on the sofa and turned on her wrist device. She saw a light spot slowly rising vertically from the wrist device, then turning into 2 light spots that extended to both sides. The trajectory of the light spots were blue energy lines. Then, the light spots turned from 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16. Each light spot extended, twisted, and expanded in a different trajectory, A moment later, a huge three-dimensional map appeared in the middle of the lounge, exuding a faint blue light. Rather than saying that this was a virtual three-dimensional map, but if one looked closely, they would find that this was clearly the structural diagram of an interstellar battleship. It was just that many important places in the map were empty because the light spots could not outline them at all. If the machine gun was still alive, he would be shocked to see this map because the top bridge of the battleship seemed to be the mouth of a gourd. Below it was the main mining area. This gourd was buried under it. But for the entire battleship, the gourd occupied less than 2/5 of the space. The machine gun thought that he had figured everything out after staying in the mining area for 6 years. But in fact, he was also kept in the dark. "Officer Julie, you have a new communication message." The system's female voice suddenly sounded in the room. "Connect it." Julie immediately turned off the wrist device. The marshal's image quickly appeared in front of her. He did not look very well, and his eyes were bloodshot. Obviously, he was in a state of exhaustion after a fit of rage. Sadler was not only his favorite subordinate, but he was also one of the best in the mercenary group. In the end, he was inexplicably killed by a worker. This made him very angry, but when he saw Julie, he still maintained the necessary courtesy. "Miss Julie, the obstacles at the entrance have been cleared, but there are a lot of branches that lead to other areas. It will be difficult for us to find Ding Meng in a short time." Julie nodded slightly. The marshal's report was completely within her expectations. It was normal that they could not find Ding Meng, but it would be strange if they found him. Even she did not know the situation of the empty spots in the battleship, let alone the marshal and the others. "Lock down the PC-35 area. Don't let anyone in or out." Julie slowly gave the order. "Withdraw your men." This. The marshal obviously did not understand what she meant. "Miss Julie, the memory chip has not been found yet, and Ding Meng is a key figure. He may have clues. If I call everyone back, it will be harder to find him." Julie said coldly, "We don't need to find him." "Why?" The marshal was stunned. Julie's eyes flashed coldly. "He will come back for us." Chapter 28. Julie's judgment was obviously correct. At this moment, Ding Meng was sitting down in a long corridor, resting. The blood-generating agents and steel mixtures he had taken from Machine Gun and the others had all been used to treat their injuries. Now, there were only 16 nutrient solutions and a few scattered healing agents left in the bag. Based on his calculations, he could only last for 5 days at most. If he couldn't find a way out or get supplies after 5 days, then he would be in big trouble. Using Little Rascal's point of view, he was still a beginner Origin ability user. His body hadn't been modified by Origin energy yet, so he still needed to eat and drink to replenish his energy. Otherwise, he would starve to death. Along the way, Ding Meng had passed through either long metal corridors or spacious halls. Apart from that, there was nothing else. He gradually began to believe Little Rascal's judgment. This was an interstellar warship buried underground. Judging from the various ancient facilities, this warship had been buried underground for many years. This very well explained why the steel plates in the experiment hall were made of relatively backward quaternary alloy. It was because it was too old. But why had this warship been buried for so long? Ding Meng had no interest in understanding this. He only had one feeling, and that was heat. The interior of this warship was hotter than the experiment hall. It was as if this place was filled with an invisible heat wave that could roast a person at any time. The human body could only withstand 70 degrees Celsius. Any higher, and a person wouldn't even be able to last an hour in this high temperature. According to Little Rascal's data, the current temperature had already reached 93 degrees Celsius. This was no different from pouring boiling water on one's skin. It was reasonable for an Origin ability user to be safe and sound in this environment. But where did this heat wave come from? Little Rascal, didn't you say that the warship's energy source had been completely used up? Ding Meng asked, puzzled. That's right. The last reserve energy source was used to modify your body. If there was still energy, I would definitely be able to detect the fluctuations. Little Rascal was silent. She couldn't explain the cause of this heat wave either. By the way, Ding Meng, Can't you withstand this temperature? Ding Meng said, So what? Little Rascal said, I suggest that you open your psychic vision to a suitable location and observe while absorbing. You might be able to find the heat source of these waves if you follow your senses. That place might be the exit. Ding Meng's eyes lit up. What Little Rascal said made sense. At present, he could observe the essence source with his telekinesis. Although his telekinesis vision was still within 4 meters, he could maintain it for a long time. The origin energy inside the battleship was obviously more abundant than in the experiment hall. Even if he expanded his field of vision to 10 meters, he could still easily sense the surging airflow around him. The origin essence was still like jumping stars in the Milky Way, fusing into his body one after another. Thus, the cool feeling in his chest became clearer and clearer, bringing with it a clear feeling in his brain and a comfortable feeling in his limbs. However, when he narrowed his field of vision to 4 meters, he could no longer see the essence source as stars. Instead, it was a dense mass of bright spots, just like snowflakes falling from the sky. Unfortunately, he couldn't absorb all of it, only a small portion of it. Little Rascal said, Absorbing more origin energy isn't necessarily better, especially for beginner-level origin energy users. Using your human language, absorbing origin energy is also about tailoring one's clothes and eating according to the dishes. Some origin energy users aren't very talented, and their physiques aren't at the level of so-called excellent. If they absorb too much origin energy, they won't be able to circulate it properly. Ding Meng closed his eyes and groped around in the darkness. Why is that? Little Rascal said. Let me give you a simple analogy. If the human body is a container, then origin energy is water. Every container is different. If the water is full, it will naturally overflow. However, some people forcibly absorb the water when it's full without letting it overflow. What do you think will happen? Ding Meng hesitated. The container will change shape? Little Rascal said, If it's light, it will change shape. If it's serious, it won't be strange for it to swell and shatter. Ding Meng nodded. I understand. Little Rascal said, However, Ding Meng, you don't have this problem. Why? Ding Meng was curious. Little Rascal proudly said, Your body has been modified by the K virus. Not only is its absorption ability very strong, but its capacity is also quite large. Ding Meng was overjoyed. You're saying that my body is a bottomless pit? You wish. Little Rascal couldn't help but laugh. Unless you're a god, no one can cultivate a bottomless pit. However, compared to many ordinary origin energy users, you really are a bottomless pit. You humans call this kind of potential innate talent. Oh, Ding Meng indifferently replied. Little Rascal was dissatisfied. Yo, look at your expression. You don't seem too happy. Ding Meng suddenly opened his eyes. You're wrong. I'm very happy. I think I've reached the exit. Little Rascal's interest was piqued. At this moment, in Ding Meng's field of vision, the origin essence was as dense as rain, directly washing over his body. This situation indicated that the heat source was getting closer and closer. Moreover, the top of his head, shoulders, and chest had already stopped absorbing origin energy. There were even faint signs of rejection. At this moment, Ding Meng felt the chill on his body gradually recede, and the heat in his chest slowly began to emerge. The heat gradually turned into a burning sensation, burning his entire body. His body once again felt like it was about to explode. Ding Meng hurriedly closed his telekinesis field of vision. In the distance, in the darkness of the long and narrow tunnel, there seemed to be a bright spot. It was clearly a ray of light. Ding Meng's spirit was shaken. He took a step forward and rushed forward. The bright spot gradually grew larger, and the light also gradually grew brighter. After running for a long time, Ding Meng's heart finally began to pound. The exit. It really was the exit. He could directly see a ray of light shining in from the square opening of the tunnel. It was definitely not artificial light, but natural light. The outside world. Was it really the outside world? Had he left the range of the base? After going through so many hardships and dangers, Was he finally going to regain his freedom? With an extremely excited heart, Ding Ming recklessly jumped out of the tunnel. The moment he jumped out, an extremely dazzling ray of light covered his retinas, forcing him to close his eyes. This was because he had been in the dark for too long and was unable to adapt to the sudden burst of light. Then, an even more intense wave of heat enveloped his entire body. This was no longer a simple wave of heat. It was as if he was completely immersed in a sea of magma. It was practically enough to cook him alive. However, no matter how great the obstacles were, they could not stop a person's yearning for freedom. He had already endured so much torture and suffering. So what did the current bright light and high temperature count for? Ding Ming sat down cross-legged for about 3 minutes. Only when his body had completely adapted to the bright light and high temperature did he slowly open his eyes. He finally saw the outside world. However, at this moment, his eyes and mouth were wide open. He couldn't even utter a single word. He was completely dumbfounded and stunned. Chapter 29. This place was indeed the exit. Ding Ming was absolutely certain of this. The exit should be the place where the pipes connected to the outside of the battleship were located. Through the broken gap, he could see that the alloy steel plates at the edge had completely corroded. Ding Ming had jumped out from this gap. The exit was between 2 rocks. These hard rocks could be seen everywhere in the resting area of the base. They were huge, ugly, and even somewhat ferocious. The rock was also on top of a slope. With this slope as the center, it was surrounded by a barren desert. It was different from the weathered wastelands in the base. The desert outside was a true desert. There was yellow sand everywhere. The heat wave made the sand look as if it had been cooked. It was so hot that one's vision was a little distorted. But what really shocked Ding Ming was not this, but about 300 meters in front of him, there was an indescribable presence of chaos. A kind of energy flow that looked like a curtain of light, but also like a mixture of air currents, rose from the ground and soared into the sky. From afar, it looked like an invisible membrane. The energy flow in the membrane seemed to be surging and rotating, but after staring at it for a long time, it felt like it was still. He could not tell what it was, but all the heat came from this energy flow. He stood up and looked around. The whole world was filled with this kind of bright white chaos. It covered the whole sky like an atmosphere, and also the whole earth. Being in this chaos was like being in a fantasy space. Ding Ming had never seen the outside world before, and he could not even imagine it. Ding Ming sat down on the ground. He suddenly remembered Machine Gun's description. I can't describe what the outside world looks like. I can see everything, but I can't see anything. But there's one thing I'm sure of, and that's that there's no way we can escape from here. Ding Ming finally understood what Machine Gun meant. Machine Gun could see everything, which meant that he had seen this chaos before. If he could not see anything, it meant that he did not know what the outside world was like. Ding Ming finally understood why Machine Gun had such a blank expression and empty eyes when he talked about the outside world. It was because the scene in front of them was beyond their comprehension. Machine Gun was not spouting nonsense. Ding Ming realized that the heat wave was scarily hot. With every step he took, he felt like he could not take it anymore. After walking only 10 meters, Ding Ming retreated to the exit. "Little rascal, what's the temperature now?" Ding Ming asked. Strangely, Little Rascal didn't say anything. "Little Rascal?" Ding Ming called out, but the white dot in the center of his vision did not move at all. Just as he was feeling perplexed, Little Rascal's voice suddenly rang out, its tone turning serious. Detected that the gene body is full of energy. Level 1 memory authorization unlocked. Authorization complete. The white dot finally began to move. Not only did it move, but what was even more surprising was that the white dot actually began to change. It slowly grew from a dot to a small white disk. This time, the disk did not stay in the center of his vision. Instead, it slid to the lower left corner of his vision and slowly turned in a circle. "This is..." Ding Ming was surprised again. Little Rascal's cheering voice finally rang out. "Ha ha! Ding Ming, congratulations. Because your body is full of energy, it has automatically triggered the system command of the memory. As a result, I have obtained level 1 authorization. Now I can help you even better. Oh, Ding Ming was happy. Little rascal, are you now this round thing? What do you mean by this thing? Little rascal was a little dissatisfied. The disc suddenly stood up. I leveled up now. Naturally, my appearance has changed even more. Ding Ming's eyelids drooped. You went from a dot to a surface. You call this change beautiful? Little rascal said, Ding Ming, sit down right now. Activate your telekinesis vision and focus it on a single point. Merge your consciousness into the first layer of the memory. Ding Ming did not hesitate. He immediately sat down and did as she said. His vision quickly shrank to a single point, and this point slowly wormed its way into the disc. With a whoosh, a whole new world appeared in Ding Ming's vision. This was a completely sealed room. A person was standing in the center of the room. Upon closer inspection, this person's physical features were exactly the same as his own. Even the clothes he wore were the same ragged, coarse clothes that laborers wore. Little rascal said, This is a virtual image created by the memory based on your physical features. This is also your primary consciousness space. Watch carefully. As soon as she finished speaking, the human figure in the center of the room became transparent and then enlarged. Ding Ming noticed that the figure's heart seemed to be flashing with light. The heart was quickly enlarged to the size of a human body. Ding Ming was finally able to clearly see that the flashing object was a dot of light. The dot of light seemed to be embedded in the heart's aortic valve. Ding Ming asked, What is this? Little rascal explained, This is the origin energy supporting the origin energy in an origin ability user's body. Its function is to upgrade your body and make you stronger. All origin ability users have this origin energy in their bodies. Simply put, it is the origin of an origin ability user. Ding Ming asked curiously, All origin energy users have it? Yes, but having it is one thing, and cultivating it is another, Little rascal explained. If you want to open up the origin, you need to channel your origin energy to shape it. Only once the shape is successful can your potential truly be unleashed, and you will be promoted to a true superpower. Ding Ming was overjoyed. This is the so-called cultivation technique? Little rascal said, Correct. Ding Ming couldn't wait any longer. Then let's begin. Little rascal sneered, Don't be happy too early. Cultivating isn't as easy as you think. After saying this, the dot of light on the aortic valve was immediately enlarged to the size of a human body. Upon closer inspection, it looked like a sphere. In reality, once the microscopic world was expanded, the inside of the sphere was filled with dense lines. It was abnormally complex. Compared to this, the three-dimensional map of the main mining area from the machine gun paled in comparison. This was because these weren't just simple lines. Looking at it from different angles, they formed a complex and profound pattern. It was like a planet full of vitality. One had to use origin energy to reconstruct the structure of its internal meridians in order to make it emit the source of life that was full of intelligence. Ding Ming was dumbfounded. Isn't this thing a little too complicated? Complicated? Little rascal was dissatisfied again. Normal origin energy users need to meditate for a long time just to enter the consciousness space. After entering the meditative state, they also need the help of the sensory pod to see the effects of the cultivation technique. Moreover, most cultivation techniques are smart chips, not biotech memory chips. Then, the sensory pod will perform a virtual comparison before the initial cultivation can begin. If there's a problem with any part of the process, everything will have to be redone. You might not know this, but normal origin energy users can't meditate for too long. If they reach a critical point, they'll be forced out by the sensory pod. Ding Ming was dumbfounded. Little rascal couldn't be bothered to pay attention to his astonishment. It continued to ramble. The K-virus has transformed your body into a super gene body that can directly absorb origin energy. Your telekinesis vision can also directly enter the microscopic world. As long as you remember the internal structure of the origin, you can mobilize origin energy and directly cultivate. You don't need to meditate, You don't need external assistance. You don't need the sensory pod. 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 Tell me, how many troublesome steps has the K-virus saved you? You were so lucky to have been chosen by the main program #1 to become the lucky one. But now you're telling me that it's complicated. Little Rascal continued to ramble on. Ding-Ming didn't retort or ignore it this time. He was indeed provoked by Little Rascal's words. He had always envied those Origin Energy users and Origin Energy warriors. But he didn't know that their extraordinary abilities were cultivated under such complicated and even harsh conditions. Compared to them, it was just as Little Rascal had said. He was one in a million lucky ones. If he thought that the structure of the Origin was complicated just by looking at it, then he deserved to be sent to the Black Gold base because he really was a piece of trash. Stop talking. Ding-Ming suddenly interrupted her. What? Little Rascal was stunned. Are you angry? No. Ding-Ming's expression was serious as he replied in a deep voice. It's not complicated. It's very simple. Let's start now. Little Rascal laughed again. Right, this is the image of Ding-Ming in my mind. Chapter 30. Although it sounded simple, it was far more complicated than Ding-Ming could have imagined. The first step was to carefully observe the intricate structure of the Origin. There were various shapes, patterns, geometries, cubes, polyhedra, and even irregular and disordered objects. And remember their sizes, lengths, angles, proportions, and positions. This first step consumed the energy in his body all the time. With the concentrated observation of his telekinesis vision, the burning sensation in his body gradually faded away. This was a sign of energy consumption. Of course, his brain, chest, and shoulders were also absorbing the essence at the same time. For Ding-Ming, this was a test of his memory ability. Why are Origin ability users so respected? It's because they have to put in so much more effort than normal people. Ding-Ming inwardly encouraged himself. Little Rascal said, You need to keep in mind that observation and cultivation are worlds apart. Many people observe carefully enough, but if there's even the slightest deviation in their cultivation, they usually have to start all over again. If there's a major error in the formation, it will directly lead to the collapse of the Origin. This is the principle behind cultivation deviation. A single mistake will lead to a series of mistakes. In the end, not only are you no longer an Origin ability user, you're even worse than a piece of trash. Ding-Ming couldn't bear to hear Little Rascal call him a piece of trash. He focused even more on his observation. After an unknown amount of time, he finally retracted his telekinesis vision and left the consciousness space when he felt his body becoming very weak. By this time, the entire world had darkened. It was already evening. Ding-Ming opened a vial of nutrient solution. How long have I been observing? Little Rascal said, 8 hours. How did it pass so quickly? Ding-Ming swallowed the nutrient solution in one gulp. He still felt very weak. Little Rascal didn't discourage him this time. Instead, he praised, Ding-Ming, your cultivation speed is quite fast. Most people wouldn't be able to form a deep impression without 3 to 5 days of accumulation. Ding-Ming suddenly fell silent. He didn't know how fast other people cultivated, and he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to it. However, based on his own cultivation speed, if he spent 3 to 5 days just to observe, it would be no different from waiting for death. The supplies in the bag were limited, and there was no way they could last for 6 days. He had no idea what the outside world was like, but one thing was for sure. There was no nutrient solution here. Ding-Ming said, Little Rascal, let me ask you a question. If I open up this origin point, will my enfeeble resistance increase? Little Rascal clearly understood what he meant. Ding-Ming, this point is located at the position of your aorta. Once the formation is successful, the first thing that will change is the blood that flows to every part of your body. The blood will naturally modify your cells, and when that happens, your physique will be greatly enhanced. You won't feel tired or hungry even if you don't take nutrient supply for several days. All right, let's continue. Ding-Ming gritted his teeth and took out 2 more bottles of nutrient solution and drank them. Whether he lived or died depended on this. In this situation, he had no choice but to risk his life. The second step was naturally to focus his telekinesis vision on his heart, and then accurately locate the position of the light spot on his aortic valve. This was an even more difficult step because a real human body was different from an illusory body. An illusory body was a simulation, and it was static. Moreover, Little Rascal could enlarge or shrink it at will. However, a human body was breathing at all times. The external chest only rose and fell slightly, but the internal microscopic world was fluctuating like space and time. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was to accurately locate a point. The advantage of the sensory pod was reflected in this situation. When a person was in a meditative state, their body was almost static due to hibernation, and it was very easy to locate the origin point. Little Rascal said in a low voice, "Focus your mind, calm your mind, throw away all your selfish thoughts, control your breathing pattern, and slowly enter the origin point." Ding Meng acted like he was facing a great enemy. He carefully guided the energy into the sphere. The position was empty, and only the blood molecules were flowing. Now, he was relying on his memory to imagine the lines and patterns and driving the energy to construct the origin point. If the inside of the origin point was like the capillaries of a human body, then the energy was the blood that was poured into it. In Little Rascal's vision, the energy essence was now a golden liquid that spread out in the air like a three-dimensional map. It gradually formed a magnificent interstellar map, shining brightly in the vast universe that was the human body. After a long time, the last line was drawn. The sphere seemed to have been injected with life. It turned completely golden and began to rotate spontaneously. Countless blood molecules that passed through this point also turned into golden molecules. The golden blood flowed to every part of his body, starting a new round of transformation. Ding Meng could see with his psychic vision that the original cells were being continuously devoured to form a new type of molecules. These molecules enveloped his body in warmth and gradually cooled him down. He could even feel that the heat from the chaos outside was not as hot as before. Little Rascal did not dare to disturb him until he withdrew his psychic power and opened his eyes. Little Rascal could not hold back its scream anymore. "Oh my God, you actually succeeded in the first try. You really are a genius, child." Ding Meng did not know if he was a genius or not, but he knew that he was really hungry right now. Ignoring the situation after the transformation, he took out a nutrient solution and poured it into his mouth without hesitation. He swallowed 5 nutrient solutions in one go, but he still felt hungry, so he simply swallowed another 5. A few minutes later, he felt a little better. Little Rascal sighed. This kind of low polymerization nutrient supply can no longer satisfy your needs. You have to find something more advanced. Ding Meng sighed in satisfaction. Creating an origin is indeed very difficult. He was not being modest. He really was speaking from the bottom of his heart. During the cultivation process, just now, he was actually a little distracted. He kept thinking about the problem of time and supplies, so his concentration level was especially high. Little Rascal also sighed. Ding Meng, you really are a genius. It's not an exaggeration to say that you are a genius. Do you know how long it takes an ordinary origin ability user to create their first origin? Ding Meng asked curiously, "How long does it take?" Little Rascal said, "It takes 3 to 5 days to observe and 3 months to successfully create an origin. Moreover, it takes many attempts, but you only took 3 days to succeed. You're about 20 times more efficient than an ordinary origin ability user." That short moment just now was 3 days? Ding Meng was stunned. No wonder he felt hungry. A few days had already passed. When he looked at his bag, he found that there were still a few nutrient solutions in the box. Right now, origin ability, origin, and whatnot were useless. Finding a way to obtain nutrient solutions was the most important thing. Little Rascal said, "However, you've already undergone a preliminary transformation with origin ability. Your body's resistance to fatigue and weakness has been greatly enhanced." Ding Meng said, "So you're saying I've already become an origin ability warrior?" "It's still too early." Little Rascal proudly replied. Right now, you've only created your first origin. At most, you could be considered a beginner origin ability user. You have to wait until all the origin points in your heart have been created and all of them have been connected. Only then can you be considered to have broken through and become a true origin ability warrior. Wait a moment. Ding Ming hurriedly stopped her. You said that I have to create all of the origin points. Then how many do I need to create? Little Rascal said, forget about it. I'm afraid that I'll scare you if I tell you. You should take it one step at a time and work hard at every origin point. You should know that the further you go, the more difficult it will be. It's impossible for you to become a fatty in one go. If I really tell you the number, I'm afraid that it will affect your confidence. Ding Ming thought for a moment and felt that her words made sense. As such, he changed the topic. Then what's the name of this cultivation technique that I'm going to cultivate? Little Rascal's tone immediately became serious. This cultivation technique is your most basic thing, but it's also the most important thing. Ding Ming asked why. Little Rascal said, why don't we think of cultivation as building a building? The cultivation technique is the foundation. The more solid the foundation, the taller the building will be in the future. That's why our cultivation speed was slow at the beginning, because we needed to build a solid foundation. Don't you think that's the most important thing? Ding Ming nodded. That's right, Little Rascal said. It wasn't easy to obtain this cultivation technique, so no matter what happens in the future, you absolutely must not reveal it. Seeing her explain it so mysteriously, Ding Ming couldn't help but ask, what's the name of this cultivation technique? Little Rascal said, it's called the Diamond Star Technique. Chapter 31. After creating the first origin, Ding Ming was able to get within 50 meters of the chaos. However, he could not go any further than that. The temperature was over 130 degrees Celsius, and it was extremely difficult to advance even a meter. Little Rascal could not figure out anything about this strange world outside either. Based on her analysis, the first thing she could confirm was that the chaos was not caused by technological energy fluctuations. This ruled out the possibility of it being man-made. Secondly, the heat contained origin energy, but there were no origin energy fluctuations. This proved that it was not caused by some powerful expert. In the end, Little Rascal concluded that the chaos was the power of nature. So you're saying that the outside world has always been like this? Ding Ming couldn't help but ask. Little Rascal said, that's right. The outside world is like this. Ding Ming suddenly felt a wave of worry. They were in a dilemma right now. Going forward was definitely not feasible. If they retreated from the surface, they would end up in the outer perimeter of the base. Ding Ming was not so arrogant as to think that he would fight a group of fully armed mercenaries head-on. Little Rascal said, Ding Ming, I have an idea. You can continue cultivating and strengthen your constitution. Then you can enter the chaos and see what's inside. Who knows, you might find a way out. This was indeed a good idea. However, the problem was that constructing the origin required a lot of time, energy, and supplies. In the end, the nutrient solution was still the most important thing. Ding Ming suddenly said, let's go back the way we came and return to the main mining area. Little Rascal said hesitantly, the commander's men are probably waiting for you in area PC-35 right now. Ding Ming sneered, the temperature inside the warship is so high. It'd be strange if they could find this place. Little Rascal said, but if their men are equipped with power armor, it's possible. Ding Ming said, but the risk is the lowest if we return to the main mining area. At worst, we'll just have to be careful and avoid them. Fine, Little Rascal said helplessly, but Ding Ming, even if we go back now, there's no nutrient solution in the main mining area. It's fine. Ding Ming gritted his teeth and said, we can rob them. Little Rascal was stunned. Rob? Ding Ming nodded and said, yes, let's go and grab other people's bags. Won't we have them now? Little Rascal immediately giggled and replied, yes, that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? Hee hee, robbing is my favorite. Ding Ming was speechless for a while. It seemed that this name was not given for nothing. There was a sense of evil in it. Although it was called robbing, it was actually not very feasible. Ding Ming knew that he was definitely a thorn in the side of the mercenary group. If there was a big commotion in the main mining area, it would be difficult for him to smoothly escape. If Little Four hadn't risked his life to save him last time, it would have been hard to say who would have died between him and Sadler. When he thought of Little Four, Ding Ming felt a little sad. It could be said that his life was given by Little Four, and Little Four's request was to bring this bracelet back to his distant hometown. Sometimes the difference between people could be so great. Some people live for wealth, power, beauty, glory, dreams. But there were also people who lived just for the sake of living. Whether it was lowly or noble, it was purely for the sake of survival. Bamboo Pole was such a person. He was currently sitting on a wooden plank, directing a group of laborers to move all kinds of rotten materials into the experiment hall. Area PC-35 had been sealed off a few days ago, but Bamboo Pole was still able to enter. It had to be said that he was quite capable, so when Ding Ming saw him, he didn't underestimate him at all. Actually, Ding Ming also knew that Bamboo Pole was the leader of the laborers in the main mining area. In the base, Bamboo Pole's experience was no less than machine guns. Now that machine gun had been taken care of by Ding Ming, it wasn't surprising that Bamboo Pole would appear here. Noticing Ding Ming's silent appearance, Bamboo Pole was also alerted, but he still calmly waved his hand, signaling his subordinates to make way for him. Ding Ming. Bamboo Pole looked at him. Boss Bamboo. Ding Ming slowly walked forward. He didn't care about the dozens of laborers around him. Now that normal people were no longer a threat to him, he was more concerned about the leader of the laborers. Bamboo Pole looked to be in his 50s or 60s. His face was quite old, and his left leg was broken, so he could only sit on a wooden plank and be carried around by the other laborers. Based on this, Ding Ming was quite impressed. For a person with a broken leg to be able to make so many people obey him, there had to be a reason. As expected, the first thing Bamboo Pole said surprised Ding Ming. Is there a shortage of nutrient solution? Yes. Ding Ming suddenly realized that he had overlooked this leader of the laborers. Bamboo Pole looked weak and sickly, and he usually didn't like to provoke others. But in reality, this guy's eyes were quite sharp. Little Rascal suddenly said, Ding Ming, I feel like there's something wrong with this guy. Ding Ming immediately became alert. What's wrong? Little Rascal said, I can't describe it, but I just feel like there's something strange about him. Ding Ming was silent. He quietly opened up his telekinesis vision and scanned his surroundings. He didn't find anything wrong with his surroundings, and Bamboo Pole was still in a half-dead state. He leaned against the wooden plank and said indifferently, You should know my style. Ding Ming obviously knew. Little Four had told him before that Bamboo Pole had always boasted of fair trade, honest to all. Although that was what he said, in reality, there were very few people who didn't suffer a loss when dealing with him. Seeing that Ding Ming was still silent, Bamboo Pole suddenly said, You can't go back to the surface for now, and you probably can't move around too much down here. This was an inexplicable sentence, but Ding Ming immediately understood. Bamboo Pole's information network was very efficient, even better than machine guns. This sentence had two meanings. The first was that the mercenary group now regarded Ding Ming as an enemy. Most of the laborers might not know this, but Bamboo Pole already knew. The second meaning was that Bamboo Pole understood Ding Ming's current thoughts quite well. He knew that Ding Ming urgently needed supplies, but didn't dare to make too much of a commotion. So, you want me to work with you? Ding Ming asked in a low voice. Bamboo Pole said, You also know that I'm different from Machine Gun. I don't care if you used to be Machine Gun's person or not. What I care about is the benefits. As long as there are benefits, I won't betray my partner. Ding Ming was silent for a long time. Then he reached into his bag and took out a handful of things. Seeing that he was about to move, a laborer immediately came over to take the things and then handed them to Bamboo Pole. This was a handful of C-grade, rough diamond stones, more than the diamonds Ding Ming had turned in at the exchange center. This was also Ding Ming's stock. Originally, he had planned to keep a low profile in front of Vader and the others, but now that he urgently needed a large amount of nutrient solution, he had no choice but to take them out. Bamboo Pole casually picked up one of the stones and examined it carefully. Then he waved his hand, and a laborer immediately brought a small leather case to Ding Ming. It seemed that Bamboo Pole had prepared this case a long time ago. Chapter 32. Sure enough, there were nutrient supply vials neatly lying inside the suitcase. Under the illumination of the searchlight, they emitted a bright white luster. There was also a yellowish luster within the white luster. This was not the cheap product used by the laborers, but a better nutritional oral medicine. Who knew where Bamboo Pole got this stuff? A rough count showed that there were about 30 vials of nutrient solution in the suitcase, enough to last for 10 days or so. However, there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Ding Ming abruptly raised his head and stared at Bamboo Pole. "Boss Bamboo, what do you mean by this?" Bamboo Pole said leisurely, "My trademark is that I keep my word. Your raw stones are worth this price, and you deserve this suitcase. As for where did you get them? Where are you going? What are you going to do? That has nothing to do with me. I don't know, and I don't want to know. Am I clear enough?" Ding Ming was silent for a moment, then turned around and walked back without another word. It was not until they were far away that Little Rascal asked, "Ding Ming, that's not right. Why is this guy so generous?" Ding Ming sighed. "You also notice that something is wrong?" Little Rascal said. "He can't be like Machine Gun, right? On the surface, he wants to cooperate, but in reality, he's full of bad ideas." Ding Ming shook his head. "He's completely different from Machine Gun. That's why I trust him." He seemed to know what Little Rascal was going to ask next, so he took the initiative to explain. "Don't ask. His appearance here is not a good sign. We don't have much time. If we quickly cultivate and improve our strength, our chances of survival will be much higher." Little Rascal agreed. When it came to cultivation, she was even more enthusiastic than Ding Ming, and this time, her cultivation was undoubtedly much easier. Once they returned to the outside world, Ding Ming found a spot in the desert that was as close to the chaos as possible. He then sat down cross-legged, opened his telekinesis vision, and quickly entered his mind space. Just like last time, Little Rascal zoomed in on the human figure. The origin was still at the heart, but unlike last time, there were 2 origin points, one in each of the left and right atriums. Little Rascal's explanation was that the heart was the source of power for the human body. If one wanted to completely transform their body, the heart was the most important area, and it was also the core construction area of Diamond Star technique. Ding Ming did not dare to be careless. He carefully examined the second and third origin points. Compared to the first origin, the second one was more complicated. The number of patterns and structures had increased by about 15%, but the third origin was more complicated. But Ding Ming dared to say that he would not be able to memorize all of them. Little Rascal said, "The Diamond Star secret art is a technique that starts from the easy to the difficult. You can remember a small part of it first, then start cultivating it. When you're almost done, you can exit and remember the rest. As long as you don't make any mistakes, you can slowly build the origin point one by one. There won't be any side effects to your cultivation. When your origin point is slowly formed, your memory ability will also improve." Although Little Rascal's method was a little clumsy, there was no other way. After all, in this dangerous environment, there was no external force or medicine to temporarily stimulate and improve memory. However, with the box of nutrient solution traded by Bamboo Pole, Ding Ming no longer had any worries. He focused on his own training. There was also a benefit to being in the outside world, and that was he did not have to worry about being found. It was indeed possible that the general and the others would send mercenaries to find him, but in that case, they would have to use a large number of power armors to equip the soldiers. Judging from Black Gold Base's various stingy practices in the past, this possibility was not high. Therefore, Ding Ming might as well go all the way. He swallowed a dozen nutrient solutions and entered a state of meditation. After the second origin point was successfully constructed, Ding Ming was surprised to find that a golden line had formed between it and the first origin point. This line was like a link between the 2 points, constantly releasing layers of fog-like origin energy up and down. It was only now that Ding Meng felt a real, qualitative change in his body. Previously, he could clearly feel the origin energy filling his limbs and bones. But now that the origin energy had completely merged with his body, he could feel that the strength of his fist was obviously different from when he was an ordinary person. He could even control the speed at which the fine sand on the ground scattered when he casually grabbed it. When he held up his hand like a knife, there seemed to be a faint layer of energy flowing on the surface of his palm. Ding Meng did not doubt that he could chop an engineer's shovel with his bare hands. Little Rascal said, "The first time you construct your origin points, you just need to let them take shape. You still need to constantly absorb origin energy to maintain, stabilize, and strengthen them. Those truly powerful origin ability users are constantly strengthening their origin points. Many powerful origin ability users can casually strengthen their origin points. A random origin point of theirs is more powerful than a few or even dozens of origin points of ordinary origin ability users." Ding Meng obviously agreed with this statement. He had never seen the cultivation methods of other origin ability users, but he could feel it through his own cultivation. For example, after he reconstructed the first origin point, the speed at which it spun was clearly much faster. The golden blood particles that flowed out were also much denser, constantly flowing to every part of his body. It could be said that it was completely like a furnace, constantly tempering his entire body. After the third origin point was constructed, there were 3 golden lines connecting the 3 points. Finally, the points formed a surface. This triangular surface was like a bright and clean mirror embedded in his heart. In the mirror, an exquisite diamond-shaped pattern flickered from time to time. "Is this diamond the meaning of the diamond star technique?" Ding Meng asked. Little Rascal said, "Ding Meng, the first section of the first stage of your diamond star technique has been preliminarily completed. Now, focus your mind on controlling this pattern and using the essence energy it produces to strengthen." "Strengthen?" Ding Meng asked curiously. "How do I strengthen it? What should I strengthen?" Little Rascal said, "That will depend on you. If you feel that your body, talent, or ability can be strengthened, then strengthen it." Ding Meng asked, "Can I strengthen my martial arts?" Little Rascal said, "Martial arts cannot be strengthened. You have to rely on your own hard work to advance it." Ding Meng was a bit depressed. Right now, his weakest link was his martial arts. Little Rascal pondered for a moment before saying, "Ding Meng, you can't say that you don't have any martial arts at the moment. It's just that your martial arts are too monotonous. What's the point of strengthening it if you can?" Ding Meng said, "Isn't that right? I'm not afraid of learning 1,000 moves, but I'm afraid of mastering a single move. As long as I can train this one move to the point where no one can block it, why would I need to learn anything else?" That's true. Defeating your opponent in a single move is quite in line with your style. Little Rascal expressed his agreement. However, in this kind of environment, Ding Meng suggests that you strengthen your body's resistance. Right now, you are really very weak. Little Rascal's words were not without reason. The previous battle with Leopard and Saddler had fully exposed this problem. Ding Meng's bones had been fractured with just one punch. In Ding Meng's mind, this was not because the opponent was too strong, but because he was too weak. Sometimes, those old sayings still made sense. If you want to beat someone up, the first thing you have to learn is to be beaten up. Ding Meng took a deep breath. "All right, I'll give it a try." Chapter 33. Following Little Rascal's instructions, Ding Meng focused his telekinesis vision on his heart and focused his energy on the mirror. As he focused his origin energy, the mirror immediately became clearer and no longer flickered. Little Rascal said, "Now it's time to test your body's endurance. Focus your mind and channel your energy into the diagram. At the same time, you need to maintain your focus and endure the pressure it brings to you." The origin point began to spin rapidly, and the 3 golden lines began to circulate faster and faster. The mirror began to slowly brighten, from gold to yellow, then white, and finally bright. It was like a pure white prism in the depths of the universe, emitting light in the darkness. This process was not pleasant. Ding Ming felt as if his chest had become 1,000 kilograms heavy, as if it could crush him at any moment. However, he forced himself to endure. This was a critical moment, and the slightest lapse in concentration would cause all of his previous efforts to go to waste. The diagram at the center of the mirror had already taken shape. It no longer looked as simple as a simple diagram, but rather a lifelike and exquisite diamond. Little Rascal said, "Use your fastest speed to break it down and direct the pure origin energy to spread throughout your body." As soon as he said this, the mirror shattered with a ding sound, turning into a cloud of dust that slowly spread throughout his body. Ding Ming immediately felt the suffocating pressure on his chest disappear without a trace, and a cool feeling returned to his body. "Is that it?" Ding Ming lowered his head and inspected his body. "It's still early." Little Rascal immediately interrupted him. "You're too slow." Ding Ming asked curiously, "How is it fast?" Little Rascal replied, "When you've truly mastered it, you can condense a diagram in a few minutes or even a few seconds, and the speed at which it spreads throughout your body will instantly spread throughout your body. You have to constantly cultivate, condense, and disperse until you can do as you please. Only then will you not feel as uncomfortable as before." This, Ding Ming was a little dumbfounded. "How long did I take?" Little Rascal coldly replied, 32 minutes and 46 seconds. Ding Ming asked, "Then how long does a normal cultivator take?" Little Rascal replied, "The first condense takes more than an hour." Ding Ming breathed a sigh of relief. "Not bad." Little Rascal was immediately dissatisfied. "Ding Ming, you can't be so arrogant. Compared to normal origin ability users, you're indeed pretty good, but what kind of harsh environment are we in right now? If you want to survive, you can't relax at all. If you're not cruel to yourself, the enemy will be crueler to you. Do you understand?" Understood. Faced with Little Rascal's criticism, Ding Ming did not feel embarrassed at all. He pulled himself together and sat down cross-legged. With the first experience of strengthening, he would undoubtedly become more proficient in the following steps. However, the discomfort and pressure brought about by the process of condensing the pattern was not something that ordinary people could endure. Even Little Rascal, who was observing the process, couldn't help but inwardly sigh in admiration. Ding Ming was truly the type of person with a firm will. Praising him was useless. Only by criticizing him and spurring him on would he be able to unleash his astonishing potential. Ding Ming forcibly endured the suffocating feeling of a mountain pressing down on his chest. He knew that the longer he endured, the purer and stronger the energy condensing the pattern, and the more resistant his body would become in the future. As his proficiency increased, the speed at which he condensed the pattern increased. Gradually, the pressure began to lessen. It was as if he could activate the origin with just a thought, and a new mirror surface was easily formed. After a long time, Ding Ming finally felt a little hungry. He couldn't help but open his eyes. "Little Rascal, how much time has passed?" Little Rascal replied, "It's already been 13 days, 8 hours, and 56 minutes. Time really flies when I'm cultivating." Ding Ming said as he gulped down the nutrient solution. Even this slightly more advanced nutrient solution can't withstand the consumption of cultivation. Little Rascal said, "Cultivation is a very expensive thing to begin with. The stronger you are, the more it will consume. Looks like I'll have to go find the bamboo pole again." Ding Ming stood up and stretched his limbs. He tried to walk forward. He was getting closer and closer to the chaos. He could stop about 30 meters away from it. The energy currents in the chaos were already visible to the naked eye, but Ding Ming still couldn't see what was hidden in the chaos. "Ding Ming, don't you think it's strange?" Little Rascal suddenly asked. "It's night now, and the temperature hasn't dropped at all. I've been observing for so many days, and I've discovered that the temperature hasn't changed at all whether it's day or night. This doesn't conform to the laws of nature." Ding Ming, Ding Ming. "Hey, Ding Ming, I'm talking to you." Ding Ming couldn't answer her, because his attention was completely focused on the rear. After this period of cultivation, his perception had improved by leaps and bounds. How could the people behind them possibly hide from him? Following his line of sight, Little Rascal also saw the bamboo pole sitting alone in a crude wheelchair at the exit of the warship, waving at them. Little Rascal's tone turned cold. No wonder I felt that something was off about him. So he's also an origin energy user. Ding Ming nodded. He understood the principle behind this. To be able to reach the exit of the warship without any protective equipment meant that this person was definitely not an ordinary human. At the very least, he was a beginner origin energy user. Why couldn't I see it before? Ding Ming asked. Little Rascal replied. Ding Ming, it's normal that you couldn't see it. You're still too weak right now, so you can't sense the natural aura of the origin energy on his body. Telekinesis can easily see through people far weaker than you, but it's difficult to see through people stronger than you. Ding Ming said, That's not right. I heard that bamboo pole has been in the base for 4 or 5 years. Could it be that he's been hiding all this time? Little Rascal pondered for a moment before saying, From what I know, once a person's cultivation reaches a certain level, they can hide the aura of their origin energy. Obviously, he doesn't belong to this category. Ding Ming nodded. He agreed with this point. If Bamboo Pole was a mid-tier or high-tier origin energy user, he could do whatever he wanted in the black gold base. There was no need for him to sneak around the mines every day. Little Rascal said, There's another possibility, which is that he's using some kind of external force or medicine to help him hide. I've heard of these methods before, but I don't know the specifics. However, if he's able to get his hands on something like that, then his origins are quite suspicious. Let's go over and see what he's up to. Ding Ming secretly sucked in a breath, forcing himself to calm down. Chapter 34. The dark night was sinister, and the giant rock looked even more hideous. Bamboo Pole, who was sitting under the rock, looked even weirder. His empty pants swayed beside the wheelchair, which made Ding Ming even more nervous. Leopard, Machine Gun Saddler, and the others were vicious and cruel, but that could be seen from the surface. People like Bamboo Pole were not like that. You couldn't tell what he was really thinking from his appearance. After staying in Black Gold Base for a long time, the real danger was not the harsh environment, the cruel mercenaries, or the incurable diseases. It was the complex and sinister human heart. Recently, Ding Ming had a deeper understanding of this. He wasn't wrong. Just as he was 10 meters away from the exit, Bamboo Pole on the wheelchair flew up without warning, like a spinning top suddenly spinning into the air. Even though Ding Ming had already mentally prepared himself, he still didn't expect Bamboo Pole to have such a movement technique. What was even more unexpected was that Bamboo Pole's left leg suddenly swept across the air. The empty leg of his trousers suddenly trembled and straightened. When the leg swept over, there was even a strong sound of wind breaking. This was clearly the effect of origin ability. Ding Ming stretched out his right hand to block it. Who knew that the straightened pants would suddenly become soft, and like a snake, it coiled around his wrist and then quickly circled around it a few times, making his right hand unable to move. At this time, Bamboo Pole's killer move was revealed. His right leg swept over with an even more ferocious momentum. This wasn't some kind of martial arts technique. It was just a simple total annihilation, but the power of this sweep couldn't be underestimated. The leg hadn't even arrived, but the shock wave it set off was enough to make people stop breathing. Ding Ming was taken aback. His left palm formed a knife hand and quickly backstabbed the opponent's ankle. This knife hand was neither fast nor fierce enough, but the timing and position were perfect. It was as if the Bamboo Pole had voluntarily delivered the ankle to him. Pong! The two forces collided, and there was a muffled sound in the air. Ding Ming didn't move. Bamboo Pole, on the other hand, flew back and sat firmly in the wheelchair. He looked like a half-dead old man, leaning on the chair without moving. If it weren't for the fact that Ding Ming's palm was still shockingly hot, he wouldn't have believed that this sickly old man's kick could be so powerful. Bamboo Pole suddenly said, Very good. It seems that you also cultivate origin energy related to heat. This makes things much easier. As he muttered to himself, he pulled out a bundle from behind the wheelchair and casually tossed it over. Here, take this. Ding Ming took it and opened it to find another large bundle of nutrient solution. However, upon closer inspection, other than the nutrient solution, there was also a small bundle of pale yellow medicine. What's this? Ding Ming couldn't help but ask. Bamboo Pole's expression was very calm. The nutrient solution should be enough for you to use for a while. The yellow medicine is also a steel mixture, but it's not the kind you think it is. Using it will temporarily increase your resistance to high temperatures. Ding Ming stared at the medicine in deep thought. You don't seem to have any ill intentions. Bamboo Pole calmly replied. If you had it as well, then the power of that palm strike would have been enough to shatter this chair. A look of praise appeared in Ding Ming's eyes. Bamboo Pole's kick had seemed fierce, but in reality, he hadn't used his full strength. Thus, Ding Ming hadn't used his full strength either. All he had done was send Bamboo Pole back into the wheelchair, and he hadn't used any more or less strength. After going through the construction of the origin, Ding Ming's judgment, understanding, and control of power had clearly reached a new level. I just don't understand. You've always been a fair trader, so why are you giving me these supplies for free this time? Ding Ming slowly asked. For free? Bamboo Pole suddenly laughed. Who says I'm giving you these for free? Ding Ming stared at him. Then what do you want? Perhaps we both want the same thing. Bamboo Pole replied as he took out a metal storage device. A ray of light quickly shot out from its port. This time, the map couldn't be any simpler. A red dot, a green dot, and a blue line connecting the two dots. What does that mean? Ding Ming didn't understand. Bamboo Pole explained, the green dot is where we are right now. Then what about the red dot? Bamboo Pole slowly said, that's where I want you to go. Looking at the map, Ding Ming seemed to understand. You want me to pass through this invisible thing? It's not an object. Bamboo Pole also looked at the distant chaos. It's a barrier. A barrier? Ding Ming finally found a more reliable explanation. Bamboo Pole's expression was somewhat serious. Normal people can't survive in this place because the temperature is too high. Normal origin ability users can't survive in this barrier because the temperature is even higher. Ding Ming suddenly realized that Bamboo Pole knew more inside information than Machine Gun. Then what's the point of this barrier? Bamboo Pole turned to look at him. This barrier separates the outside world from the inside world of the base. This place isn't the outside world. Ding Ming found it hard to believe. Absolutely not. Bamboo Pole answered him firmly. Everything you see now is an illusion. I know you must want to ask what the truth is. I can guarantee that you'll see the truth. Ding Ming lowered his head in thought. Where's the red? It's exactly 102 kilometers from here. Bamboo Pole began to manipulate the map again. A curved barrier appeared between the two dots. Not far from the barrier, a yellow dot appeared. Then, starting from a yellow dot, another curved line connected to the red dot from below. The yellow dot is only 8 kilometers away from the barrier. With your current strength and the resistance provided by the steel mixture, you'll be able to find the entrance in 1 hour. What kind of entrance? Ding Ming stared at him again. Bamboo Pole replied calmly. An entrance that can save our lives. Of course, once you enter, it might also take your life. Whether you can return safely will depend on your luck. Ding Ming took a small breath and continued to ask patiently, what should I do after I reach the destination? Bamboo Pole seemed to sigh as well. I know you must have a million questions in your mind, but I can only answer you this way. Only when you get out and see the real world will you know why and what to do. Some things don't need to be taught. A smart person will know what to do. This time, Ding Ming was silent for a long time before he said, I'm only curious about one thing. What is it? Ding Ming said, why don't you do it yourself? Why do you insist on having me do it? Bamboo Pole said seriously, fine. Since you've asked, I can also tell you. Based on the current situation, no one in the entire base can pass through this barrier except for you. Ding Ming stared at him. Your origin energy seems to be of the thermodynamic system as well. Why can't you pass through? Bamboo Pole didn't answer his question directly. Instead, he asked, I also have something to ask you. Do you feel safe hiding in this place? This. Ding Meng was stunned. The exit of the warship was definitely located outside the base. Compared to the main mining area and the base's surface area, this place was undoubtedly safer. However, this type of safety was only relative. If the Grand Marshal and the others were willing to put in a lot of effort to find him, they would still be able to find him. Bamboo Pole didn't wait for him to answer. He continued to ask, You've been hiding here for almost half a month. Don't you think it's strange? The people who ambushed the mercenaries couldn't find you. Ding Meng's heart sank. He finally understood what Bamboo Pole meant. If Bamboo Pole could find his way here, how could the Grand Marshal and the others not be able to find him? Something must have happened to the mercenary corps in the base while he was cultivating. Chapter 35. Bamboo Pole seemed to know what Ding Meng was thinking. He took the initiative to say, Area PC-35 hasn't been very peaceful recently. Not many people have died, but all of them have some reputation. For example, Leopard. If you were able to kill him when you first arrived at the base, I'd be willing to bet 1 to 5 that you would have died. Ding Meng said, What if I said I was lucky? Bamboo Pole laughed. I've lived for so long. Do you think I've lived for so long by relying on luck? Ding Meng was silent. In that battle with the leopard, just based on strength, he was really inferior to the leopard. Bamboo Pole continued. Let's say you were lucky. What about Machine Gun? What about his subordinates? What about Sadler later? Did you rely on luck? I think you know the answer to that. Ding Meng could only keep his mouth shut. Bamboo Pole paused for a moment, then continued. All the signs point to your strength increasing greatly in a short period of time. However, it's normal for a normal person to practice martial arts. However, you were knocked back by my kick just now. That's not something a normal person can do. If I'm not wrong, from the moment you discovered that the main mine was actually an interstellar warship, you had a fortuitous encounter. You might have found the legendary memory chip of the K-virus. Ding Meng was truly shocked when he heard the words K-virus. He wasn't the only one who was shocked. Even Little Rascal was quite shocked. The K-virus was an extremely confidential matter. Even Grand Marshal Vader and the others didn't know the name of the virus, but Bamboo Pole was able to say it so easily. However, Bamboo Pole's expression was still calm, so calm that it was a little scary. Since the K-virus didn't kill you, it's very likely that the memory chip is on you. However, how can you cultivate in the wilderness without a sensory pod? I won't ask you this question, and I don't want to know. This is very likely your secret. How did you do it? No one knows, so all I have to do is wait. Wait? Ding Meng didn't understand. Bamboo Pole said, I'm not the only one waiting. I think the people above are also waiting. They are waiting for you to die in this so-called outside world. On the contrary, not only did you not die in this place, your origin energy is even more abundant. Ding Meng asked, What does this mean? There was a trace of excitement in Bamboo Pole's tone. This means that you may have grasped the secret of the memory. You can evolve from an ordinary human to an origin ability user in a short period of time without the help of the induction chamber. If this secret were to be known by the Federation or the Empire, it would be a world-shaking piece of news. Ding Meng finally understood the real reason why the Tian mercenary group hadn't made a move for so many years. Bamboo Pole's tone suddenly had a hint of sadness. I'm not interested in the memory chip of the K-virus. At my age, my only wish now is to leave the base as soon as possible. I believe you're the same. You definitely don't want to die in this place. Ding Meng naturally understood his mentality. Bamboo Pole probably only sensed origin energy in his middle age. But so what if he sensed it? Not to mention, one of his legs was broken. It was basically impossible for him to have any achievements. Just based on the exchange just now, Ding Meng felt that Bamboo Pole was even weaker than himself. At most, he would be a beginner origin ability user. Ding Meng said, Are you saying that we can leave the base once we reach the place you mentioned? Bamboo Pole said, You can find a quantum signal transmitter there. The program has already been written. Once the signal is sent, help will quickly arrive. If you really want to leave this place, This is the only way. This time, Ding Ming didn't hesitate at all. Okay, I'll go. Bamboo Pole said, I'll wait for you in the lobby of PC-35. If someone comes down from the base, I might be able to block them for you. It depends on how fast you move. Ding Ming didn't reply. He turned around and slowly walked toward the barrier. Little Rascal suddenly popped out. Ding Ming, do you really believe what he said? Ding Ming's expression darkened. He didn't reply. Clearly, he was thinking. Little Rascal said, based on my calculations, it doesn't seem like he's lying. This situation is exactly the same as when we encountered the machine gun last time. We clearly know that he's telling the truth, but in the end, we still fell for his trick. Ding Ming sighed. I know that as well, but there's no way forward. There are pursuers behind us, and danger lurks everywhere underground. If we keep delaying like this and can't find a way out, I'm 80% sure that we'll be doomed. This was what they meant by knowing that there are tigers in a tiger's den. Little Rascal was silent for a moment before saying, then let's try the steel mixture he gave us. Bamboo Pole hadn't lied to Ding Ming. After he consumed the unknown steel mixture, a cold energy immediately spread throughout his body. Using his telekinesis vision, he discovered that the heat energy he cultivated was flowing through his body was golden in color, while the steel mixture produced a thin, sky-blue stream of energy. Little Rascal immediately explained, this is the power of the ice element. In theory, the ice element and your heat element are two completely different types of energy. However, they're both catalyzed by origin energy, so they won't clash violently for a short period of time. However, as time goes on, your heat element will devour them. We have to take advantage of this time to act quickly. Ding Ming nodded. He could also sense that his body had suddenly become cold, so the high temperature around him couldn't devour him for the time being. However, the origin energy in his body sensed the influx of external energy, and the golden energy immediately sped up. The barrier quickly appeared before them. Ding Ming sucked in a deep breath. What in the world was this thing? What in the world was inside this thing? He had been curious for so many days now. As such, he gently reached out his hand. The barrier wasn't thick at all. His arm passed through it as easily as if he was reaching into water. There was no obstruction at all. Little Rascal said, the temperature inside is as high as 213 degrees Celsius. Even if a beginner-level origin energy user can enter, they won't be able to stand for too long. Ding Ming took a big step forward and finally entered the barrier. The world inside the barrier wasn't too different from what he had imagined. Countless airflows and intangible energies mixed together. If he could describe it, it was like a person staying in an underwater world. Everything around him was like a mirror, a mist, and a void. However, there was one thing that exceeded his expectations. There was a faint light inside the barrier. It was clearly daytime, but the world on the other side of the battleship was dark. The only difference between day and night was this thin layer of barrier. If he stretched his hand in, it would be like the first glimmer of dawn, but if he stretched his hand out, it would be the darkest night on the other side. Ding Ming said in surprise, Little Rascal, do you know what's going on here? Little Rascal said, I can't figure it out for now, but this barrier is several dozen meters wide. Let's just pass through it and see what's going on outside. Okay. Ding Ming strode forward. It only took him a few seconds to pass through the barrier. In that instant, an indescribable heat enveloped him. None of the previous heat waves had been as intense and sharp as this one. Hurry up and circulate the energy in your body to resist. Otherwise, you'll be in danger of getting burned, Little Rascal said. The temperature outside is as high as 493 degrees. Ding Ming didn't dare to be careless. His vision focused on his heart, and he quickly condensed a mirror to strengthen his body's resistance. As the pure energy spread out, his limbs immediately cooled down. At the same time, he finally saw the real world outside. He also finally saw the truth that Bamboo Pole had mentioned. Chapter 36. This was a vast and barren planet. Ding Ming was sure that he was on a planet because he could see the horizon. Due to the barrier surrounding the base, He could not see the horizon. Since he could see the horizon, it meant that he was standing on the ground. He was in a real world. However, this real world looked even more unreal because there were as many as 5 scorching suns hanging in the sky. These 5 suns were all above the horizon, and they emitted different colors of light from 5 different directions: azure blue, fiery red, brownish yellow, lavender, and milky white. These 5 colors of light intertwined, and not only did they illuminate the entire planet, they also dyed it into a grotesque world. Ding Ming counted again to make sure that he was not mistaken. There were really 5 scorching suns shining on this planet. At this moment, many of the inexplicable phenomena now had the most logical explanation. Why was the base so hot, but the airless basements were cool at night? That was because the entire planet was exposed to the sun. Why was the base always sunny and never raining? That was because the high temperature had completely evaporated all the water. Why was there a pool in the main mining area, PC-35? That was because the evaporated water had gathered underground. Why were the tentacle monsters in the pool afraid of light? That was because the surface temperature was too high for them to survive. These primitive creatures had been in the underground world for too long, and they had long evolved into monsters that were afraid of light. Why did the barrier exist? If there was no barrier, the entire black gold base would be roasted to a crisp. All the strange phenomena in and out of the base were caused by the unique celestial position of this planet. At the same time, one thing was certain: the barrier was not natural but man-made. Its purpose was to reduce the light and heat, and to create day and night. It created all kinds of illusions for the workers working here. This was a remote but normal planet with day and night, and the 4 seasons alternating. If you contributed to the base, you could even leave this place. In fact, this colorful planet was a purgatory furnace in the true sense. It was only now that Ding Ming finally understood Bamboo Pole's words. Everything you see is an illusion. Little Rascal said, "Ding Ming, hurry up and move. The temperature outside is still rising. You won't be able to hold on for long." According to the Bamboo Pole, the distance between the yellow dot and the barrier was only 8 kilometers. But in fact, this 8 kilometers of road was not easy to travel. The terrain outside was a bit like the Gobi Desert. There were a lot of bumpy faults, and the surrounding slopes were a bit undulating. Many of the high slopes were erected with jagged rocks that looked like lighthouses, giving people an uncomfortable feeling. Little Rascal continued to provide data. Current temperature, 575 degrees. Distance, 1,233 meters. That should be the location of those trees. As far as the eye could see, a few tree trunks could be faintly seen on the distant mountain ridge. No matter what kind of tree it was, as long as it could grow in purgatory, it proved that it was alive. However, when Ding Ming ran up the mountain ridge, he discovered that there was a huge pit below. The skeleton of an animal was lying in this pit. The tree trunks he and Little Rascal saw were just a few bones on the skeleton's back. The skeleton was as big as a mountain. Ding Ming, who was on a mountain ridge, was so small in front of this giant skeleton that he could not even be compared to an ant. Looking further ahead, the desert in the distance was full of skeletons like this. Some were intact, some were loose, some were broken, and some were piled up like cotton. They were densely packed together, forming a mountain of corpses and a sea of bones. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Ding Ming really could not imagine how huge these creatures were when they were alive. He also could not imagine what caused these creatures to become skeletons. Little Rascal said, "These should be the original organisms of this planet. I wonder what kind of power killed them. Virus? Radiation? Contamination? Battle? Powerhouses? But these don't look like them." Ding Ming did not answer her. His telekinesis vision could now clearly see a metal tunnel buried in the ground of this giant skeleton. This tunnel was clearly different from the one leading to the experiment hall. Other things aside, the steel plates on the walls were exquisitely coated with laser light. There was a very conspicuous symbol engraved on them: 2 daggers crossed together by a steel ring. Little Rascal said, "This is definitely not the warship on the other side of the barrier." Look at this metal. There are no signs of corrosion at all. Also, these steel plates are made of multi-element alloys. The facilities here are obviously more advanced than the warship on the other side. It's at least 100 years ahead. Little Rascal's judgment was correct. At the end of the tunnel was a real command hall. As soon as Ding Meng stepped in, the lights in the hall automatically lit up. This was a completely silver-white metal palace. All kinds of simple, but not simple facilities, smooth and gorgeous lines, a dazzling array of technological devices. Everything pointed to another spaceship. In the middle of the hall was a large conference table. Ding Meng had seen this before, so he knew that it wasn't a real conference table. Instead, it was the main control panel of many interstellar spaceships. It was the core of the command center of the spaceship. The captains and first officers would study the route and issue orders on this table. Ding Meng walked forward and pressed his palm against a notch on the side of the table. The control console lit up as expected. At the same time, the system's voice rang out. Crew members detected. System activating. Insufficient energy detected. System recharging. Reception source malfunctioning. Recharging not possible. Ding Meng frowned. What's the meaning of this? Little Rascal hesitated. My initial judgment is that this spaceship's activation device is the light source recharging system. It's currently buried underground and can't receive sunlight, so it can't automatically recharge. This situation is similar to the one on the other side. It's probably using the remaining backup energy. Ding Meng thought to himself. No wonder Bamboo Pole wanted him to come here to send the signal. It turned out that he already knew that this spaceship couldn't take off. At this time, the control console was fully activated. The four corners of the console lit up to form a screen on the table. On the screen were rows of neatly arranged command options. 1. Energy system. 2. Flight system. 3. Weapon system. 4. Supply storage. 5. Inspection cycle. 6. Signal transmission. 7. Auxiliary functions. 8. Command repair. 8. Database. There were a lot of options, but the problem was that only signal transmission and database were green available. The other options were all dim. Ding Meng also knew that this situation was usually due to either insufficient energy or insufficient authority. Ding Meng reached out and pressed on the database column. The interface changed again. This time, it showed 1. Map information. 2. Character information. 3. Flight route information. Except for the map information that was lit up, the large row of options behind it were all dark. Therefore, Ding Meng only clicked on map. This time, an extremely exquisite virtual 3D map was erected on the platform with a swish, swish, swish sound. Chapter 37. Unlike the machine gun's memory map, this 3D map created by the main control console was not only more detailed and clearly marked, it was also dynamic. The map in front of them was the command hall Ding Meng was in. The structure of the hall could be seen very clearly on the map. The flashing green dot in the middle was Ding Meng himself, and the coordinates 1, 1 were written next to it. Ding Meng reached out and fiddled with the map. The hall quickly shrank, and the structure of the entire warship was displayed. This was not an interstellar warship, but a Falcon spacecraft. From the dynamic map, the spacecraft should have been engaged in an intense firefight in the air. The hull of the spacecraft looked like it had been cut in half by a sharp knife, and the bow of the spacecraft had fallen down and was buried in the sand. Zooming in further, the situation on the planet's surface was displayed. Of course, what Ding Meng was most interested in was naturally the barrier. On the map, the barrier looked like an ancient clock hanging from the ground, completely sealing the black gold base inside. Can you zoom in any further? Little Rascal suddenly asked. Zooming in again, the barrier was as small as a glass bottle, but the top of the barrier was marked with a bright white disc. The disc was constantly spinning, and above it was a huge hovering interstellar transport ship. Little Rascal said, I understand now. This thing is called a dome. Ding Meng was curious. A dome, Little Rascal said. This is a very advanced liquid metal. It absorbs the sunlight from above and turns it into a normal habitable environment. The dome must have been released by the transport ship. The mercenary group's headquarters should be on top of it. Ding Ming nodded and continued zooming in on the map. At this time, the system notified that the map had been expanded to its maximum limit, and a mysterious and magnificent map of the galaxy appeared before him and Little Rascal. 5 blazing suns of different colors were orbiting a giant star. Each blazing sun had a different orbit and speed. The planet Ding Ming was on was the furthest and smallest star in the galaxy. Compared to the 5 blazing suns, it was practically a speck of dust. Ding Ming said, "No wonder they had to install a dome. So there will never be true night on this planet." Little Rascal said, "No, you're wrong. Look at the map carefully." The map was displayed in the form of a dynamic picture. As Ding Ming fiddled with it, the 5 stars of the sun were moving faster and faster. Tremendous data, coordinates, and symbols were refreshed, too. After every rotation, eye-catching numbers would appear on the top left corner of the map. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When a number reached 20, the 5 scorching suns, the central star, and the planet where Ding Ming was located formed a straight line. Ding Ming could not help but say, "I understand. There is still night, but we have to wait for the stars to form a line to block the sunlight." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire map flashed red. This was a warning. Taking a closer look, the color of the planet he was on had changed. The entire planet had turned red and was flashing with red light. In a galactic map, this kind of warning usually meant that danger was approaching. Now that the entire light had turned red, it meant that this danger would affect the entire planet. Ding Ming stared at the map. "Can you understand it this way? When true night comes, something big will happen on this planet." Little Rascal sighed. "That's right. The trajectories of these scorching suns follow a pattern. Every once in a while, they will form a line, and the sunlight will be blocked by the central star. Thus, our planet will be plunged into complete darkness. This is the so-called solar eclipse." Ding Ming stared at the string of Arabic numbers. "There will be a solar eclipse every 20 months? Little Rascal said, "No, there will only be one every 20 years. Ding Ming sighed. "That's fine. The cycle is very long, so we probably won't run into each other." Little Rascal's tone was unusually serious. "Very bad. According to my calculations, the next solar eclipse will appear in 12 hours, 36 minutes, and 18 seconds. This..." Ding Ming was dumbfounded. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Little Rascal said, "The solar eclipse will last for 36 hours. According to this map, if there is really some kind of danger, it will be very difficult to survive 36 hours. No wonder that bamboo pole wanted us to come here and send the signal." Ding Ming closed the map and stopped his gaze at the signal transmission column. At this moment, he had a strange feeling because he suddenly remembered the scene when he and Little Four crossed the pool and found the entrance to the experiment hall. Little Four looked at the round door with a trace of worry in his eyes. He seemed to see some kind of ominous disaster floating out from behind the door. "Brother Ding, let's go back. I'm afraid we won't be able to handle it if we keep going." He felt like he was in Little Four's shoes. Once this quantum signal was activated and sent out, it would probably attract endless disasters. He could not explain why, but he had this feeling. "Little Rascal." Ding Ming suddenly closed the interface. "What's wrong, Ding Ming?" Little Rascal did not understand his action. Ding Ming's expression was thoughtful. The K-virus must have been developed by a very powerful expert. Little Rascal said, "That's for sure. It's just that I don't have enough authority to know who the creator is." Ding Ming said, "This person should have arrived on this planet many years ago. For some reason, he took a space warship to this planet, and the K-virus spread out. As a result, all the creatures on this planet were infected with the virus. Due to the problem of genetic compatibility, some died, some went extinct, and some went mutated. So, this planet became a land of death." His guess was not without reason, because everything he saw and heard along the way matched his judgment. Ding Ming continued, "Until about a decade ago, there should have been two groups of people who came to this place. They were both looking for the K-virus. One group was the assault mercenary group, and the other was Bamboo Pole. Little Rascal was shocked. Huh? Why? Ding Ming explained. Think about it. Why is Bamboo Pole so familiar with the situation outside? He even knows about the situation inside this space warship. The only explanation is that he has been here before. I'm thinking that perhaps his leg was broken during the fierce battle back then. In the end, the assault mercenary group gained the upper hand. So, they built the Black Gold base and have been constantly digging in the main mine ever since. Little Rascal finally understood what he meant. The K-virus is very important. Once news of it gets out, who knows how many factions will fight over it. It's not hard to explain why this place is full of ordinary people like laborers and mercenaries. Any origin ability user with a bit of fame or strength will attract the attention of the outside world. Ding Ming nodded. I've already fused with the memory chip. If I transmit the quantum signal now, I'll be selling myself out. Little Rascal completely understood his thoughts. The solar eclipse is coming. Even if there's help from the outside world, there might not be enough time. If you want to leave this place, I'm afraid you'll have to go back to the base. Ding Ming's tone became firm. Let's go back. Chapter 38. In the dark and damp underground tunnel, Vader, who was wearing a power armor, was walking slowly. As far as he could remember, it had been almost a year since he last went down to the mine. If it weren't for Julie's insistence, he wouldn't have come down no matter what. Regarding the woman sent by the client this time, he had a feeling of displeasure and uneasiness from the bottom of his heart. In the past cooperation, the people assigned by the entrusting party to patrol were still capable, which made him and the marshal quite admire them. But this time, except for giving orders, Julie stayed in the VIP lounge all day long and did not come out. No one knew what she was thinking. Not only did she not do anything, but after Sadler was killed by Ding Ming, this woman actually pulled everyone out of the PC-35 area and didn't ask about it for more than half a month. Vader's really puzzled. Now, Julie was following behind him. She was still wearing a business suit, a pair of high heels, and a pair of sunglasses. She walked unhurriedly, not caring at all about the mud and water splashing in the tunnel. Miss Julie, we're still a little far from the PC-35 area. Should we take a break? Vader turned his head and asked. Julie was still indifferent. No need, Officer Vader. We'll just maintain this speed. Vader hesitated and said, Miss Julie, can we really find Ding Ming in the PC-35 area? He was actually very careful with his question. Julie had pulled the mercenaries out of the PC-35 area for more than half a month, and no one could figure out her intentions. Now that she had come down to the PC-35 area in person, Vader was not only puzzled, but also a little uneasy. Julie said, I told you he'll come back to us. Vader nodded. I hope the brothers of Team 2 ahead of us have already found him. Julie said, I don't want your men to find him first. Vader asked why. Why? He soon found out the answer. At this moment, the experiment hall was like a slaughterhouse. The ground was littered with corpses. Most of them were the corpses of laborers. These laborers had lived a miserable life, and their deaths were even more tragic. Most of them were torn apart by the energy bullets, just like tearing cloth. All kinds of flesh, blood, bones, internal organs, heads, and limbs were scattered all over the ground. The air was filled with the thick smell of blood. Among the hundreds of corpses, there were also more than 10 mercenaries. These people did not die as miserably as the laborers, but they all had one thing in common. Their eyes were filled with pain, fear, and disbelief before they died. Upon closer inspection, many of them had their arms and legs chopped off by the shovels and shovels of the engineers. Some of them even had half of their heads split open. Some of them even had their necks bitten by the laborers before they died. These coolies had had enough of being oppressed and bullied by the mercenaries, so even if they could bite off a piece of meat before they died, it would be good. It was obvious that this place had just experienced a fierce battle. Vader's first reaction when he saw this scene was to feel the bitterness in his stomach. He could not help but want to vomit. However, Julie walked in without a care in the world. She stood in the midst of the pile of flesh and blood, and looked around. She murmured, "You're pretty good to be able to make so many coolies die for you." Vader was startled. Only then did he realize that there was still someone alive at the opposite end of the passage. Vader shone the searchlight over and saw clearly that Bamboo Pole was still sitting in a wheelchair, half dead. Vader turned on his wrist device and quickly pulled up Bamboo Pole's personal information on the screen. Name: Shang Wu. Age: 51. Serial number: F1-1677. Source: Linda Department. Top 45. Planet of Thorns Refugee Camp 23, Tien District. He glanced over and said sternly, "Number 1677, you've got guts. How dare you incite everyone to cause trouble?" "He's not number 1677. Julie suddenly waved her hand and interrupted Vader. "He's not called Shangwu either." Vader was stunned. "What's going on?" Julie stared at Bamboo Pole. "His real name should be Tangyi." Bamboo Pole did not answer. Instead, he suddenly raised his head and stared at Julie with a gaze as sharp as a blade. Julie said slowly, 15 years ago, when the Assault Corps were building this place, you participated in the battle here with them. At that time, you were just a troubleshooter, so you were very lucky. You only lost your left leg in that battle." Vader said coldly, "Then why is he here now?" "Good question." Julie also seemed to be interested. She said leisurely, "I'm also thinking about the same thing. Why did their fleet start a fight with you?" Actually, there was no need to ask this question. Everyone was well aware that there was only one goal: the memory of the K-virus. Logically speaking, they should have made a comeback after their failure. However, the people behind them also know that they can't cause too much of a commotion here. Julie took 2 steps forward and picked up a blood-stained military shovel. She held it in her hand and looked at it carefully. She seemed to be particularly interested in this labor tool. Sometimes a larger fleet is like an energy gun. Once it fires, it will alert the outside world. However, it's different if a military shovel is sent here. Not only will it not cause any commotion, but it can also produce a miraculous effect in a place like this. Vader finally understood. Could he be a spy sent by the other party? "You're right to understand it that way," Julie replied leisurely. After returning from that battle, logically speaking, he should have used medical equipment to recover his left leg. However, not only did it not recover, but it was also broken. Why is that? I think there are several reasons. Vader said, "Please go ahead, Miss Julie." Julie said, "First, if a person with a broken leg who can't receive any medical treatment is sent here, he will definitely be considered a cripple. Under normal circumstances, no one will suspect him. Second, he has been here before, so he is at least very familiar with the environment here, which makes it easier for him to hide. Third, judging from his age, he should be a beginner origin ability user with no future. This way, he won't easily arouse suspicion, and he is also much more powerful than ordinary people. At the very least, his survival is guaranteed. Otherwise, how could a laborer with a broken leg live in this place for several years and make so many laborers die for him?" At this point, Julie couldn't help but clap her hands at Bamboo Pole. "To be honest, I really admire you. For you to be able to hide in such a difficult environment for so many years, the person who entrusted you with this task must be worthy of your trust. As for the person who entrusted you with this task, I admire him even more. He actually allowed you to hide here for 10 years before returning. No matter how carefully we checked, we never thought that someone would dare to come here a second time." Bamboo Pole had been silent all this time. At this moment, he finally sneered. "I understand that you want to know who he is, but I can guarantee that you absolutely won't know." The corner of Julie's mouth also revealed a trace of a disdainful sneer. "I have to admit that I really don't know. However, there are some things that I can roughly guess." Bamboo Pole coldly snorted and didn't say anything else. However, Vader appeared to be respectful. "Miss Julie, please go ahead." Chapter 39. Julie gestured with her fingers. After the war 15 years ago, why didn't they dare to make a large-scale comeback? Bamboo Pole snorted coldly, but didn't answer. Vader muttered, Perhaps they were afraid of causing too much of a ruckus? That's not the most important reason. Julie explained, the country closest to here is the Holy Grail Federation. Although it's not under the Federation's jurisdiction, this place is actually under the influence of the Federation's power. Vader nodded. If a large-scale fleet was mobilized, the nearest international space station that could discover their whereabouts would definitely be the Federation's. Julie said, that's why they didn't dare to mobilize a large-scale force. They wanted to avoid the Federation's line of sight. Vader was suddenly shocked. Could they be from the Norse Empire? Julie nodded. That's at least 70% possible. Vader's face sank. The Holy Grail Federation and the Norse Empire have always been at odds. If a spy from the Empire managed to sneak into the Federation's territory, then this spy definitely wouldn't have a good ending. Julie glanced at him indifferently. The question is, how did this spy from the Empire manage to sneak into the Federation's territory? Vader was suddenly startled. This question was easy to figure out. It was nothing more than a long interstellar voyage to enter the Lindis system, disguise as a cripple, sneak into the refugee camp, and finally be sent here. However, Julie's question was inexplicable, so there had to be a deeper meaning behind it. Sure enough, she revealed a strange sneer and turned her gaze back to Bamboo Pole. Originally, this was a very good move. It was originally a wonderful move, but you overlooked a problem. Bamboo Pole couldn't help but ask, what problem? Julie said, you're a cripple, and you're so old. Obviously, your talent isn't that great. For an origin ability user like you to come here and live for so many years, what did you rely on to maintain your origin ability for so long? Bamboo Pole's face was still very calm, without the slightest ripple. However, Vader's expression was quite ugly. How did you know that I am an origin ability user? Bamboo coldly asked. Julie said proudly, I can tell. It's like putting a glass of wine and a glass of water in front of me. I can tell at a glance which is the wine and which is the water. She paused and asked, what about you? What do you rely on to absorb energy? Obviously, we didn't find a virus memory. If you did, then you shouldn't be here now. Bamboo Pole immediately shut his mouth, but Julie didn't stop. Let me answer you. The only explanation is that for the past 5 years, you could only rely on the induction cabin to enter a meditative state. Through the induction cabin, you could absorb origin energy and maintain your physical strength. Bamboo Pole's and Vader's faces changed color at the same time. Julie said coldly, there are only 3 people in the base who have sensor cabins. Let me guess, which one are you using? First of all, you're definitely not using the Grand Marshals. Even Vader couldn't deny this. The Grand Marshal was the commander of the surprise attack mercenary group. He had been here for many years and was one of the most qualified veterans. It was simply a fantasy to say that there was a worker who could use his induction cabin. Sadler also had an induction cabin. Unfortunately, he was already killed by Ding Meng. Even if he colluded with you, there's no proof. Julie turned her head and looked at Vader. Don't you think so, Officer Vader? Vader's face was expressionless. That seems to be the case, Miss Julie. Julie said indifferently. Of course you hope so. Unfortunately, I had the Grand Marshal completely seal off area PC-35, but how did Tang Yi and his people get in? Vader's pupils suddenly began to contract. He finally understood where he had gone wrong. His mistake was that he shouldn't have underestimated the other party. In previous collaborations, the people who were assigned to patrol were all capable. This time was no exception. This woman, named Julie, appeared to be self-righteous and incompetent, but in reality, she was an extremely shrewd character. Without Vader's induction cabin, how could Bamboo Pole have survived in Black Gold Base for so long? Without Vader's tacit approval, how could he have let a large group of workers into the experimental hall? A forced smile appeared on Vader's face. Miss Julie, you really like to joke. I'm not joking. Julie stared at him coldly. According to the data, you and Bamboo Pole came to Black Gold Base at the same time 5 years ago. Although your contract expires in a few months, according to my investigation, your wife's life in your hometown has suddenly improved greatly in the past 5 years. She went from being a mercenary's wife to a rich madam. Where did she get so much money? Vader's smile was still very forced. My wife is good at financial investment. Her foresight has always been accurate. Julie also smiled. Her smile was as childish and laughable as an adult looking at a child lying. I believe that you are telling the truth. Then, your two children have been very talented since they were young and have been studying at the Federation's Skyline Academy. But why did they suddenly transfer to the Norse Empire's Xingwu University last year? How do you explain this? Vader suddenly raised his head, his eyes bursting with anger. Miss Julie, your side has privately investigated the privacy of our mercenary group members. This is a breach of the contract, isn't it? Julie said indifferently. Members of the mercenary group privately communicate with external forces to harm our side's interests. It also seems to be a breach of the contract, right? The anger in Vader's eyes grew. Are you threatening my family? You are wrong again. Julie waved her hand and shook her head. You are not worthy. You. Vader clenched his fists. The mechanical fist of the power armor also clenched with a kacha sound. Bamboo Pole smiled at this time. It's okay. I also know that this kind of thing can't be hidden. It will be discovered sooner or later. Since you have delivered yourself to my door, I will settle this once and for all, so as to avoid any future troubles. Julie sneered. It's best that you admit it voluntarily. Save me the trouble of wasting my breath. At this point, there was basically no room for negotiation. Bamboo Pole had been secretly accumulating energy and was ready to go. Vader also knew that his identity had been exposed. This was a critical moment. He had to make a move even if he didn't want to. Julie really had to die. With a loud bang, the energy gun on the mechanical arm quickly fired a large ball of bright white energy cannonball. This bullet was no small matter. As soon as it flew out, it blew out like a gust of wind, bringing up a large amount of flesh and dust on the ground. It was as if a large wall had come crashing down with the force of a landslide, completely enveloping Julie. Vader's Pioneer 2 power armor was more advanced than Sadler's. It was a second-generation product. An ordinary person equipped with it would be able to deal with beginner origin ability users. Therefore, he no longer underestimated his opponent. Woo! After the energy cannonball hit Julie, its volume rapidly expanded like a bright white balloon that had swelled in an instant. Then, with a loud boom, the energy cannonball automatically exploded. Countless pieces of flesh and steel plates were blown into the air. The hall shook for a moment. It was reasonable to say that an ordinary person wouldn't be able to withstand this kind of firepower. However, after a few seconds, Vader was dumbfounded. Although he had anticipated that Julie would not be easy to deal with, he had never imagined that Julie would be standing in front of him perfectly fine. There wasn't even a speck of dust on her uniform. Julie slowly took off her sunglasses and sneered. Officer Vader, if I say you don't deserve it, then you really don't deserve it. As soon as the word deserve came out of her mouth, Julie suddenly raised her hand. Like lightning, the sunglasses hit the defensive glass layer in the center of the power armor. Chapter 40. There was no light in the hall, so when the black sunglasses flew over, there was naturally no light as well. Furthermore, with Vader's strength, there was no way he could react in time. As soon as the sunglasses hit the layer of light, they turned red and melted the layer of light in an instant. Similarly, there was a loud bang and an explosion. The huge power armor crashed to the ground, and Vader's face was badly mangled. A raging fire ignited in the hall. Bamboo Pole watched all of this coldly, still motionless. Seeing that he was still able to keep his composure, Julie couldn't help but praise him. Your patience is not bad. No wonder your master sent you here. Her tone suddenly became cold again, but the result is the same. As soon as her voice fell, she finally moved. Her body swept over like a swallow, and her movements were quite light. After all, Bamboo Pole was different from Vader. Naturally, he could see her movements clearly. Julie formed a palm with one hand. She was still 5 meters away, but the wind from her palm compressed the air with a pong-pong sound. Clearly, her attainment in origin energy wasn't weak. Bamboo Pole immediately flew up from his wheelchair and swept his leg through the air with a standard total annihilation. This time, it was different from the last time he fought with Ding Ming. The wind from his flying leg also compressed the air with a muffled sound. Clearly, his strength was much stronger. Pong! There was another muffled sound in midair. The two of them met force with force, and both of them retreated a few steps. However, the broken limbs on the ground were sent flying in all directions by the powerful collision. Thermodynamics. Julie frowned. She could feel a stream of heat moving back and forth at the edge of her palm. Clearly, it was caused by Bamboo Pole's kick. Bamboo Pole didn't respond at all and soared into the air again. This time, his speed and strength had increased by several levels. In Julie's field of vision, Bamboo Pole was in front of her in the blink of an eye. With his ankle as the center, there seemed to be a layer of small spherical aura surrounding him, just like a bubble. Every time Julie's palm hit him, this layer of bubble would shatter with a bang and then shake off Julie's palms. Bamboo Pole's body was like a pair of scissors as he flew through the air. His right leg was not only fast, but it was also kicking out from various angles. Under normal circumstances, a normal person's feet would not be able to attack from such a strange angle. However, Bamboo Pole only had one leg, and the remaining leg of his trousers was not a burden. It was more convenient for him to kick in different positions, and each kick was faster than the last. Pa 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 pa, a series of rapid sounds. Julie was kicked back again and again by him. From afar, the spinning top of the bamboo pole was like countless sticks extending forward. These sticks were like the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves, constantly shaking off Julie's palms, leaving her with no time to fight back. The movement of the last kick was even more bizarre. The bamboo pole was supported by one hand, and the whole person was like an eagle that suddenly soared into the sky. With one kick, he flew straight up into the air. Pong! A muffled sound rang out, and Julie's chin was kicked. Her whole body flew up into the air, and then fell down from the air, smashing a control panel into pieces. Bamboo Pole immediately fell down, and his movements became simple again. He directly stepped towards Julie's face. His goal was very simple, and that was to stomp her to death. Ha! At this critical moment, Julie did not have time to dodge. Her two palms fiercely supported the other's soul and stubbornly resisted. Bamboo Pole's dazzling martial art was called 7 Stars Ghost Kick. Most Origin ability users did not like to practice it. The reason was very simple. Fancy things were often not practical. However, this martial art was used by a disabled person, so it was very tricky and dangerous. On the contrary, it had unexpected effects. However, the deciding factor of life and death was the final strike. Bamboo Pole's stomp was quite fierce, and had already used up all of his strength. He was also clear that if he did not finish off Julie in one breath and gave her a chance to breathe, once the higher-ups received the signal, then the consequences would be unthinkable. Seeing that Bamboo Pole's foot was getting lower and lower, and the heat from his boots was getting thicker and thicker, Julie, who was lying on the ground, clenched her teeth. Her delicate waist twisted upwards, and then her right foot kicked towards the sky. The sharp tip of her high heel hit Bamboo Pole's back. Bamboo Pole only felt a chill on his back, and a chill spread out from his heart. He also knew that this was definitely his opponent using a large amount of Origin ability energy in her body to counterattack. Thus, his right foot once again exerted strength, and borrowing the force from Julie's palm, he somersaulted backwards. However, this time he was wrong. When he somersaulted, he discovered that the surrounding temperature had suddenly dropped. The air was filled with a chill, and this chill caused his originally swift movements to become much slower. With this delay, Julie's palm arrived and solidly slapped his chest. Then, Julie changed her palm into an elbow, and with a backhand elbow, she struck his lower abdomen. Bamboo Pole was like a kite with a broken string as he fell back, smashing his own wheelchair into pieces. The power of these two strikes was not small. Bamboo Pole, who was lying on the ground, felt that his chest was so stuffy that he almost could not breathe. The Origin ability energy in his body was clearly sluggish, and his entire body was covered in a chill. Lifting his head to look at Julie, he saw that her body was faintly emitting a layer of faint silver luster. Bamboo Pole involuntarily said, "So you're an ice element user." Thermodynamics and ice elements mutually reinforced and restrained each other. Who was stronger and who was weaker depended on a person's cultivation base. Bamboo Pole's cultivation base was obviously inferior to Julie's, because from the fighting strength that Julie had erupted, she had clearly already surpassed the level of a beginner origin ability user. Julie slowly walked towards Bamboo Pole, a cruel smile on her face. "Mr. Tangyi, unfortunately, your mission has come to an end today." Bamboo Pole did not wait for her to finish speaking. He once again exerted all his strength and leapt into the air, performing a high upside sweep action. However, his target this time was not Julie, but Vader, who was crawling out of the armor not far away. Vader was not dead, but his breathing was already quite weak as he attempted to crawl towards the entrance door. Bamboo Pole's intention was very clever. If he could not escape death, he had to get rid of Vader before he died. He was not afraid of death, but he was afraid that Julie would torture Vader out of too many secrets. After all, the willpower and temperament of an ordinary person could not be compared to that of an origin ability user. Unfortunately, this kick of his could no longer display the might of the 7 stars ghost kick from before. Just as it was about to sweep across Vader's neck, Julie made the first move. Her hand, which was as sharp as an ice blade, cut across his ankle. With a crack, Bamboo Pole's foot bones immediately broke. A heart-wrenching pain almost caused him to faint. This time, he could not even fall. Julie had grabbed his calf with one hand, and Julie directly flung him out. He crashed into the wall, and even the steel plate was deformed from the impact. Julie laughed again. "Mr. Tangyi, I can now give you a chance. Tell me the person behind you, and I will guarantee your life in the Federation for the rest of your life. You should understand our credibility." Bamboo Pole dragged his already twisted right leg and curled up in a corner. Fresh blood continuously flowed from his nose, but he still laughed miserably. I've lived long enough. Come, kill me as you please." Julie was still laughing. "Of course you've lived long enough, but have you thought about it? If you die like this, what about your wife? What about your children? What should they do? Have you ever thought about them?" Bamboo Pole was also laughing, but looked like he was crying. "My wife? My children? Ha ha ha." Julie's eyebrows rose again. "What? You're not willing to think about them?" Bamboo Pole said sternly, "From the first day I came here, I had no intention of going back alive. I'm no longer anyone's relative. You want me to betray my friends? Why don't you go die?" As he answered, he waved his palm and slammed it against the wall behind him. The deformed steel plate on top was shaken off, and its sharp edges fell toward his chest. "You're delusional." Julie was both shocked and angry. She rushed forward and slammed her palm against the steel plate. However, just as she rushed over, she heard a faint warning beep. Not good. Julie finally realized that there was a trap. She stopped in her tracks and pulled back as fast as she could. She saw a ball of white energy appear at Bamboo Pole's waist. Just like the energy cannonball that Vader had shot out before, the white ball of energy instantly expanded and formed a rotating force field. In an instant, the force field engulfed everything in the surroundings. Then, with a boom, it erupted like a tide. Chapter 41. It was dark again. Compared to the eternally dazzling world outside, the main mining area had regained its original color. Half of the hall had turned into a spiral crater in the darkness. Almost all the facilities had been destroyed in the explosion. If it weren't for Bamboo Pole's position near the exit, the energy bomb would have turned the entire hall into a cave. On the other side of the hall, the debris from the explosion had piled up into a small mountain, almost blocking the exit. After an unknown amount of time, a person emerged from the ruins. Julie's hair was disheveled as she scanned the surroundings. The bamboo pole was obviously gone. If one was in the center of the explosion, it would definitely be crushed into powder. Julie's situation wasn't any better. Although she had dodged quickly, part of the explosion's shockwaves had still affected her. However, for an origin ability user with cultivation, it wouldn't cause too much damage to their body. After looking around, Julie couldn't help but smile. She saw that Vader was still alive at the entrance of the passage. This guy was quite lucky. The explosion had sent him flying along with the power armor. The armor had helped him block the fatal energy beam, but the huge shockwave had sent him crashing into the wall behind the entrance. Vader lay on the ground in a bloody mess, holding a healing gun in his hand. He was trembling as he tried to inject himself. Julie didn't stop him. She needed Vader to be alive, or rather, Vader's current state was exactly what she wanted to see. Not everyone could be like Bamboo Pole, who didn't fear death. When she thought of Bamboo Pole, she actually admired him. There were many people like him who would rather die than reveal secrets. Officer Vader, it seems that you're quite lucky. Julie walked over. Vader had already injected healing energy into his arm. The external wounds were slowly healing, but the broken bones and internal injuries would take time to heal. What do you want to know? Vader asked weakly. Julie sighed. I kind of understand why you were able to stay in this base for 5 years. You're really a smart person. You know what others need. Vader gasped for breath. They forced me? Julie asked, which company? Which faction? I just want to know the name. Vader said, I don't know. Julie's face darkened again. It seems that smart people like to do stupid things sometimes. She squatted down beside Vader and plucked out the bayonet from his thigh. She played with it in her hand. To be honest, Officer Vader, I don't want you to die either. Your contract will expire in a few months. When that time comes, you'll be able to receive a generous commission and happily return to your hometown, reunite with your wife, and enjoy life. But if you're missing some parts of your body now, you won't be able to experience some of the joys of being a man in the future. Living like that would be better than dying. Vader's teeth were actually trembling. He couldn't help but grit his teeth. He was indeed a smart man. So smart that he was a little too smart. He could tell that Julie was not a soft-hearted person. But then again, how many people in this base would take other people's lives seriously? Sometimes, even he himself was no exception. It was precisely because he understood this that he knew that if he told the truth, he would only die faster. I don't know. I only know that they asked me to take care of Bamboo Pole, Vader replied. I don't like this way of talking. Julie poked the gleaming bayonet at the waist of his trousers. The mercenary's soft armor at that area had already been cut open. She only needed to exert a little force, and the bayonet could easily pierce a person's pelvis. Vader looked at her with a nervous expression. That person's name is Julio. I met him in Mingchang City. Julie didn't answer, but her expression turned even colder. Vader suddenly shouted, Miss Julie, I promise that I'm telling the truth. I'm not lying to you. Julie still didn't answer. She just stood up with an expressionless face and slowly turned around. Her gaze fell on the exit on the opposite side. Even though she had already seen Ding Meng's information in the database, she still couldn't help but carefully size him up when she saw Ding Meng in this place. After a period of survival and cultivation, Ding Meng's originally coarse laborer's uniform couldn't be any more tattered. Like many of the laborers in the plaza, he was practically naked except for the tattered bundle at his waist. Julie scanned Ding Meng's body from head to toe. It was as if she was examining her first love. Her greedy gaze refused to let go of any part of his body, even the most private parts. In her eyes, Ding Meng was like a priceless work of art that deserved to be slowly appreciated. Her attitude immediately excited Little Rascal. Wow, Ding Meng, look, it's a woman, a real woman, and a very good one at that. Look at that business attire. TSK, TSK. Ding Meng, didn't you say that there were no women in the base? How come there's one here? What do you think? Why don't we get her? Ding Meng couldn't hear Little Rascal's words at all. Right now, all of his attention was focused on Julie. It wasn't that he hadn't seen women before, but in his world, there was no concept of men and women. There were only two kinds of people, danger and safety. This woman in front of him, who he didn't even know, gave him a strong sense of danger. This was because when his telekinetic vision swept over Julie, It seemed to be blocked by an invisible barrier. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find anything on Julie. Clearly, this woman's strength wasn't below his own. Julie clearly sensed that the other party was checking her out. Not only was she not angry, she even smiled and walked up to him. Ding Meng, I'm very happy that you're still alive. Little Rascal also sensed that something was off. Be careful. There's something strange about this woman. Ding Meng held his breath. Who are you? Julie smiled happily. Let me introduce myself. I'm Julie, the current person in charge of Black Gold Base. I've been waiting for you for a long time, Ding Meng. What are you waiting for me for? Ding Meng stared at her. Julie's tone was very gentle. I plan to take you away from here and return to your hometown. I'll let you enjoy the life that belongs to you and not suffer anymore. There was nothing wrong with this statement. It was as if she was making a promise to her first love. Her expression was also very sincere, without the slightest hint of pretense. Unfortunately, she had forgotten that this was Black Gold Base's underground mining area. Any normal person's words would be interpreted as abnormal by others. Ding Meng suddenly calmed down. How did you know? Julie was stunned. Know what? Ding Meng said coldly. A memory chip? Julie smiled again. This time, it was a happy and proud smile. Under normal circumstances, a normal person can only live for 3 days at most if they don't have enough supplies. Ding Meng listened quietly. Julie said, I know that you exchanged 20 vials of nutrient fluid from Vader. Theoretically, you should be able to last for a week. But almost a month has passed, and you're still alive. Ding Meng said, so what? Julie's eyes lit up. Not only are you alive, but you've also killed Leopard, Wolf, Machine Gun, Sadler, and a whole bunch of other people. You think you can do all this with those cheap vials of nutrient fluid? Of course not. Even Ding Meng couldn't deny this. Julie smiled. Do you know why I sealed off PC-35? Ding Meng glanced at Vader in the distance and said, You deliberately let Bamboo pull in. Julie said proudly, Of course, I can't rule out the possibility that you got some supplies from him. But with that little bit of nutrient fluid, how could you survive in such high temperatures for so many days? I gave you half a month's time just to see if you could survive. In the end, you really did survive. Ding Meng said, What does this prove? Julie sighed softly. I finally understand now. So the function of a memory chip is to allow a normal person to sense origin energy without the help of a sensory pod. It can even allow them to directly become an origin ability user. Ding Meng sneered. He asked the same question as Bamboo Pole. How did you know that I was an origin ability user? Chapter 42. Julie didn't use the same words to reply to Ding Meng. Her answer was very direct. In an instant, she took a step forward and sent a palm strike toward Ding Meng's forehead. Although this strike wasn't as fierce as the previous one, Julie was confident that an ordinary person wouldn't be able to dodge it. She had secretly activated her origin energy to stimulate the ice energy, and the wind generated from her palm was incomparably cold. The opponent's movements would definitely be slowed down. In fact, Ding Meng had also sensed it. He didn't dodge at all. His right elbow blocked Julie's palm, and his hand chopped out in a chop. Julie didn't receive the attack. With a sliding step, she retreated to her original position. Then, she revealed a happy smile. Look, isn't it an origin energy user? You just need to try and find out. Ding Meng's heart sank. He had still fallen for the opponent's trick. However, this really couldn't be blamed on him. Everyone had instinctive reactions, and the instinctive reactions of origin energy users were much faster than those of ordinary humans. Julie laughed and said, A month ago, you were just an ordinary laborer. In just a month's time, you became an origin ability user who could kill Sadler and the others. Other than the memory chip, I really can't think of any other way to make someone undergo such a huge change in such a short period of time. The memory chip must have been found by you. You can't deny it. Ding Meng stared at her. So what? Julie put away her smile and said seriously, Give me the memory chip, and I can give you freedom. I can even let you enjoy life and wealth. I can also buy it from you. Name your price. In the end, She was smarter than Grand Marshal Vader and the others. She knew to state her conditions and not to take it by force. After all, for the laborers in this place, escaping from the sea of suffering was more important than anything else. Ding Meng said, "You've been digging for more than 10 years. Presumably, you must have the memory chip?" Julie stared at him. "It seems that you are a smart man. You can think through these things. If you have any conditions, just tell us. As long as we can do it, we will satisfy you. Besides, the memory chip originally belonged to us. It was lost here many years ago. If you give it to me now, you're just returning it to its rightful owner." Ding Meng said, "Whatever you say." Julie stared at him. "You don't believe in our sincerity?" "I believe you," Ding Meng replied faintly. Julie said, "If you want money, I can give you enough. If you want to cultivate, I can give you the best cultivation environment. If you want women, I can find you the best. If you want to go back to your hometown, no matter how far it is, I can send you back." Ding Meng let out a rare sigh. "I believe what you said. I really want to promise you, but unfortunately, I can't do it." He was not sighing for himself. He was sighing for Little Four. When Little Four died, his helpless eyes, his pitiful wish, the blood-stained bracelet, and his tragic and difficult life were all things that he would never forget. To some extent, Little Four's death was so that Ding Meng could live on. As long as Ding Meng was alive, he would never make a deal with the people who caused Little Four's death. This was not a problem of intelligence, but a matter of principle. No matter how the world changed, there would always be some people who would be so stubborn. Whether you think they are smart or stupid, they will not be manipulated by others and will do things their own way. Julie's face darkened. "Can I understand it this way? You want me to kill you and then take the memory chip?" Ding Meng replied calmly, "You can understand it that way." As soon as he said this, the temperature around them seemed to drop significantly. A layer of cold, killing intent filled the air. Julie also sighed. "I thought you were a smart person, but it turns out that you are even more stupid than Officer Vader." As soon as the word stupid left her mouth, she appeared in front of Ding Meng like a ghost. Unexpectedly, she also sent a karate chop towards him. Ding Meng's fighting philosophy has always been to fight head-on. If you also use a karate chop, that's even better. Let's see whose palm is harder. With a crisp paw sound, the two karate chop met, and a wave of air surged out. Julie once again slid back to her original position. She raised her head in surprise, and a trace of pleasant surprise appeared in her eyes. She was an advanced origin energy user, and her body had already constructed 3 origin points. The Dark Abyss Ice Dust technique she cultivated was only 1 origin point away from completing the foundation of the technique and becoming a true origin energy warrior. At this stage, beginner or intermediate origin energy users were no threat to her. However, in that attack, just now, she felt that the heat from her opponent's palm was truly astonishing. It was much stronger than that of a bamboo pole. In her plan, she had planned to find Ding Meng in about 20 days. Logically speaking, Ding Meng definitely hadn't finished constructing his first origin point yet. It could be said that he was at the most critical point of his construction and couldn't be disturbed by the outside world. Thus, she was confident that she could take care of anyone when she came down. But now, Ding Meng's palm strike was actually very powerful. That left 2 possibilities. One was that Ding Meng's talent was astonishing, and the other was that the memory chip's effect was better. If it was the first possibility, then she would be laughing her head off. How could an inferior person like Ding Meng, who lived in a mining area, be worthy of the word talent? Then the possibility of the second possibility was very high. This memory chip really was something that the higher-ups wanted. It turned out that it had such a powerful effect. While she was rapidly thinking, Little Rascal was also instructing Ding Meng. This woman is an Ice-type origin energy user. Looking at her attack, just now, she probably didn't use her full strength. Ding Meng, you have to be careful. Condense the pattern formed by your origin points and increase your resistance. Ding Meng inwardly nodded. The last 2 times he had faced off against Leopard and Sadler, he had suffered a great loss in this aspect. Some of his weak points would be broken the first time he was attacked, while the second time he was heavily injured. The third time he was attacked, there wasn't a third time. Julie once again attacked. She leapt up, and with the momentum of a wild goose landing on flat sand, she hovered above Ding Meng's head. Her two palms attacked at a dazzling speed. Compared to Bamboo Pole's 7-star ghost kick, her attacks were even more numerous and swift. Pung pung pung. A series of rapid sounds rang out. Ding Meng, who didn't have any martial arts skills, could at most block the first two palms. The following 10 or so palms were simply too much for him to handle. His head and chest were like cotton while being slapped by Julie. Another pung sound rang out. Julie's final attack was a double wind piercing ear position that fiercely smashed into Ding Meng's temple. This time, Ding Meng's iron-like body finally retreated. He only felt a buzzing sound in his ears, as if there were dozens of mosquitoes flying around in disarray. His brain was a muddy mess. Julie once again turned around and retreated. This time, there was no longer any surprise in her eyes. It was completely bewildered. The main function of her annihilation of Ice Palm was to release a large amount of ice-type energy to slow down the opponent's movements. Of course, if a beginner-level origin ability user was completely hit by this move, they would either die or be heavily injured. However, looking at Ding Meng's current appearance, it was impossible for him to be injured. At most, he would be hit until his head was a little dizzy. She hadn't guessed incorrectly. Ding Meng's cultivation during this period of time was mainly to strengthen his body. It could be said that even normal energy gun bullets were useless against him. However, Julie's barrage of attacks also made Ding Meng uncomfortable. Not only was there a sharp pain in his chest, but the circulation of origin energy in his body was also clearly slowing down. Little rascal gritted his teeth and said, "Go, don't give her any more chances." Ding Meng's left foot fiercely kicked off, and his entire body flew forward. With this leap, he directly arrived in front of Julie. Then he used his signature karate chop. This was the only move he knew, and once it was used, even if it didn't kill, it would still be heavily injured. Chapter 43. In Julie's field of vision, she could clearly see Ding Meng's leap, lunge, and reverse slash. However, when he slashed back at her, his arms seemed to be slightly distorted. She knew that it wasn't a true distortion, but rather a visual error caused by his speed. Ding Meng's strength had improved by leaps and bounds during this period of time. Julie also knew that she wouldn't be able to dodge, so she used both of her palms to block. Another paw sound rang out. This time, it was her turn to take a few steps back. The force behind Ding Meng's palm had also caused her to feel the origin energy in her body stagnate. Moreover, her body wouldn't lie. Her right wrist already showed signs of a slight fracture. Was this really a beginner origin ability user? Julie's bewilderment had already turned into shock. "You're not a beginner origin ability user?" Ding Meng completely ignored her. Seeing that his attack hadn't hit, he stepped forward and switched to using his left hand as a chop to his right. This sort of attack was a bit monotonous as a child's fight. However, to Julie, this child's technique was extremely threatening. This time, she didn't dare take it head-on. She crossed her palms and used her arms to clamp down on Ding Meng's wrists and forcefully pulled them back. This borrowed force directly caused Ding Meng to fall backwards. Julie quickly turned around and raised both of her arms. Her entire body seemed to be enveloped by a layer of light blue energy. Then, she waved her palms in front of her, and an invisible stream of energy surged out. "Careful, something strange," little rascal cried out in alarm. Ding Meng had already felt it when he landed. His entire body was enveloped by an incomparably cold energy. When he raised his head again, he saw that Julie had already flown into the air. As she flew, she used the same technique twice in a row, the standard Yangtze River's 3-layered waves technique. The 3 streams of qi superimposed on each other and converged into a bubble of blue energy, trapping Ding Meng in an instant. Earlier, he had felt that the cold energy had slowed his movements, but now He felt that his entire body was so cold that he couldn't move at all. It was as if he had been completely imprisoned. Not good. Ding Meng saw that Julie's palms had turned blue. It was obvious that she was going all out. At this moment, he had no choice but to take it head-on. Ding Meng forcefully activated the mirror of origin in his body. He straightened his chest and took the palm head-on. This was the smartest move out of all the clumsy methods. Taking a hit to the chest was much less risky than taking a hit to the head. With a boom, Julie's palm of extinction landed squarely on Ding Meng's chest. Dust, broken arms, and broken limbs flew into the air as if they had been blown apart. Ding Meng finally bent over in pain, but Julie was sent flying back instead. With Ding Meng's chest as the center, a triangular white prism appeared and enveloped Ding Meng's body. The exquisite diamond mirror in the center flickered faintly for a moment before disappearing. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that this was an extremely advanced defensive technique. Julie half knelt on the ground. Her eyes were filled with shock. What kind of technique is this? Little Rascal was already proudly explaining. Our Diamond Star technique isn't some cheap trick. It's a divine technique that combines attack, defense, strengthening, purification, and many other uses. How could her cheap techniques compare to it? Ding Meng, the more you practice it in the future, the more. Ding Meng's attention wasn't on Little Rascal at all. In fact, he was also suffering from Julie's palm strike. Through his telekinetic vision, he could clearly see that the 3 origin points of his heart had dimmed and their rotation speed had slowed down. The two of them had only exchanged a few blows, but the enormous consumption of energy was far beyond what an ordinary person could imagine. Now that both of them were squatting on the ground and gasping for breath, whoever recovered first would undoubtedly have the upper hand. Ding Meng also stared at Julie. You said that as long as I give you the memory chip, you'll agree to my conditions? Julie's eyes lit up. That's right. Tell me what you want. It's still not too late. Ding Meng gritted his teeth and said, Give me an ion flyer. I'll give it to you immediately. Julie panted. You want it now? Ding Meng said, Yes. Now. Okay, I'll contact you right away. Julie reached out her hand to press the wristwatch on her wrist. A light flashed, and the communication interface immediately appeared. The moment she reached out her hand, she knew she was wrong. Ding Meng's cunning was completely beyond her expectations. Taking advantage of this fleeting moment, Ding Meng suddenly got up and rushed forward. His signature, carp leaping over the dragon gate, backhand chop, was finally unleashed. Julie's hand had just pressed the wristwatch, so she could only raise her hand subconsciously to block. Gotcha! The chop was aimed at her right wrist again. This was a weak point that Ding Meng had never overlooked. Julie could clearly feel that her wrist bones were completely shattered. The intense pain from her wrist instantly numbed her entire arm. It was only now that she realized that she had made a mistake that most people would make, which was to underestimate the enemy too much. Sometimes, the simpler the mistake, the more fatal the consequences. Under the intense pain, Julie gritted her teeth and fought back. She used all the strength in her body to kick toward the sky. This kick also caught Ding Meng off guard. Ding Meng had sensed her movement and forcefully flipped his body to the right in midair. The high heels originally wouldn't have hit him, but with a clang, a sharp blade shot out from the tip of the shoe and stabbed into Ding Meng's lower abdomen. This was the reason why she had been wearing high heels all this time. It wasn't for the sake of dressing up or looking good, but because the shoes hid her last resort. Whether or not she could save his life depended on this attack. After Ding Meng rolled on the ground a few times, he felt as if a poisonous snake had drilled into his stomach. His internal organs were in pain from the bite, but fortunately, the origin energy in his body was circulating normally, so the wound wasn't a problem. However, this wasn't the case in Julie's eyes. Her short spike was coated with a special poison that would quickly paralyze the victim and make them lose their ability to fight. Even the blood of a beginner Origin Energy warrior wouldn't be able to cure it. When an Origin Energy user cultivated, their blood would be modified, Ordinary poisons and diseases wouldn't be able to penetrate their blood. From this perspective, Origin Energy users had a much longer lifespan than ordinary people. However, not only had Ding Ming not fallen, he had even stood up. Little Rascal hadn't spouted nonsense. The strength of the Diamond Star technique was far beyond what others could imagine. Even Ding Ming himself didn't know about it. However, Ding Ming knew one thing. The woman in front of him was too dangerous. If she didn't die, he would die. Ding Ming endured the pain and pounced again. Julie pushed off the ground with one hand and also flew up. Her legs swept out like a bamboo pole. Even an arrow at the end of its flight was still a strong arrow. The remaining power of a high-level Origin Energy user couldn't be underestimated. Unfortunately, her trump card had already been exposed. Ding Ming couldn't fall for a trick again. When a short spike on her high heels swept over, Ding Ming's hand blade arrived first, cutting into her ankle like lightning. This attack was out of Julie's expectations, because she didn't even feel any pain. When she fell, she found that Ding Ming had used the momentum to spin horizontally a few times in the air, accompanied by a dark golden light that was spinning along with her. It wasn't until Ding Ming fell that she saw clearly what that light was. At this moment, Julie's pupils contracted. Chapter 44. In less than a month's time, many fights had taken place in the Dark Experiment Hall. Regardless of whether it was thrilling or tragic, none of them were as bizarre as this one. Ding Ming's back had smashed into Julie's lower abdomen. His left hand had grabbed her ankle, which was the short thorn that Julie had kicked back at him. His right hand was still in the opposite direction, but this time it was the dark gold claw blade that cut open Julie's throat. Blood spurted out like a fog. Ding Ming let go of her left hand and rolled to the side. The claw blade drew a strange arc in the air and landed on Julie's right chest. The tip of the claw accurately nailed into the position of her heart. Julie's whole body convulsed, and blood flowed out of her mouth. This situation was exactly the same as when Xiaoxi died, but Xiaoxi died very quietly, without any regrets. He knew that Ding Ming would definitely fulfill his last wish, so when he closed his eyes, there was always a smile on his face. Julie was completely different. She lay on the ground with her eyes wide open, her face full of suspicion and fear. She couldn't understand how a high-level Origin ability user like herself could be defeated by Ding Ming, who was just a beginner Origin ability user. She died very unwillingly, and she died with her eyes wide open. The world was still dark. Ding Ming sat on the ground calmly again. This time, there were no pursuers and there was no clamor. His hand suddenly trembled, and the claw blade flipped over to his palm. He used his Origin ability, and the heat immediately dried the blood on the blade. This was still the blood of the enemy. This blade needed to be sacrificed with the blood of the enemy. It needed to be washed with the blood of people like Julie, who thought that they were from a higher race. Only then would this blade have its value and meaning. What good fortune is there in gathering? What sorrow is there in parting? What joy is there in life? What bitterness is there in death? In the face of death, the higher races and the lower races were the same, so only death was truly fair. Ding Ming gasped for breath and took out the bracelet that Xiaoxi had entrusted to him before he died. After many years of playing with the bracelet, it had lost its original luster and turned yellow and black. But this time, there was no longer the blood of laborers or inferior people on it. Ding Ming lowered her head and stroked the bracelet as she muttered to herself, "Little Four, rest in peace. I've finally avenged you." Little Rascal's voice also seemed to be choked with emotion. "Ding Ming, you're good. You're worthy of Little Four's sacrifice. We didn't let him down." Ding Ming nodded. "Little Rascal, let's go. Let's get out of here." At the entrance of the tunnel, Vader, who was lying on the ground, immediately stretched out his trembling right hand when he saw Ding Ming coming over. The gun in his hand was the healing gun. Little Rascal said, "Should we take care of him too?" Ding Ming said no. Whether or not we can really escape depends on him. After saying that, he took the initiative to take the healing gun. Officer Vader, I've said it before. I just want to live. Vader's voice was very weak. Ding Meng, if you take me out of here, you will be greatly rewarded. Ding Meng looked at him. This time, I believe in you. The square on the ground of black gold base was the same as usual. There were no changes at all. The dense crowd was divided into 5 groups. Every worker was tightly hugging the bundle in front of their chest. Every single one of them was dressed in rags and was anxiously waiting. Suddenly, a cheetah transport vehicle drove into the square at high speed. It rushed into the crowd without any reason and stopped at the entrance of the exchange center. This was a mercenary group's vehicle. Many workers were angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. They could only spontaneously move aside. The people who jumped out of the vehicle were indeed mercenaries. One of them was the person in charge of the exchange center, Officer Vader. The other was also wearing a mercenary uniform and holding a long photoelectric gun. However, the mercenary behind him was a little short and wore a pair of black goggles, so no one could see his true face. The elevator inside the exchange center led directly to the command center on the top floor. Vader went straight to the central console as soon as he walked in. The marshal had been waiting impatiently for a long time. What's wrong with the communication system? I can't see the live feed for 7 hours. Vader said without batting an eyelid. The workers below are causing trouble. That Ding Meng destroyed the scanner, so I can't see the transmission feed. The marshal couldn't help but ask, "What about Miss Julie? Why didn't she come back with you?" Vader said, "Miss Julie personally captured Ding Meng alive. She's on her way back, but she's injured. She asked me to come back first to inform you." This lie wasn't taught to him by Ding Meng. He was the one who came up with it. He was taking a risk and gambling that the marshal would definitely be alerted. In this entire base, other than the memory chip, only Miss Julie's safety could alert the marshal. Sure enough, the marshal immediately stood up from the sofa and waved his hand. "Come, let's go down and pick her up. Bring along the portable medical device." Seeing the marshal leave in a hurry, almost half of the people in the command center left. Little Rascal couldn't help but sigh. "Ding Meng, you're still the smarter one. You knew to let Vader live." Ding Meng said, "That Julie's news can't be hidden for long. Once it's leaked, he'll have to run too. We'll definitely find a way to escape if we follow him." In the central building of the base, Vader led Ding Meng to the rooftop of the command center with ease. The blue Mystic Bird transport ship was quietly parked there. The two of them opened the hatch and entered without saying a word. Moments later, the transport ship slowly rose into the air, a large blue crystal flame spurting out from its tail. It really did look like a mystic bird as it soared through the clouds and through the horizon. Ding Meng sat in the co-pilot seat and looked down through the window. The entire black gold base gradually shrank and finally disappeared. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh. He believed that he would never return to this place again. The transport ship quickly passed through the barrier. At this moment, the sunlight outside was already rather weak, even weaker than the light inside the barrier. Little Rascal said, "The solar eclipse will arrive in 3 hours, 12 minutes, and 46 seconds. Ding Meng finally saw what the so-called planetary warning on the warship meant. He saw countless tentacle monsters breaking out from the ground. They were so densely packed that it was impossible to count them all. They completely submerged the sand on the ground. In addition to the tentacle monsters he had seen before, there were also countless other monsters that he had never seen before. Some of them were so huge that they weren't inferior to their transport ship. Wisps of light smoke suddenly drifted out from the jagged rocks that looked like lighthouses on the high slopes. These wisps of smoke seemed to be under some kind of magic. They sometimes twisted into ropes, sometimes into clouds, and finally tore apart like pieces of paper and exploded in midair. When they flew closer and took a closer look, they found that these weren't real smoke, but countless birds and monsters. They covered the entire atmosphere like they were blotting out the sun. The degree of ugliness was simply indescribable. It turned out that when the solar eclipse happened on this planet, these monsters would come out. Ding Meng finally understood how the sea of skeletons of those creatures on the ground came to be. Perhaps they were all eaten up by these monsters. Little Rascal said, "Ding Ming, I detected a lot of mutated fluctuations of the cave virus. These monsters should be infected." Ding Ming nodded silently, but he sighed in his heart. The transport ship was now flying very high. He could also see the dome very clearly. It was indeed a huge piece of liquid metal, like a circle of white water suspended in midair. Now, with the arrival of the solar eclipse, the dome that was as bright as the sun star was also dimming. It was obvious that it could no longer absorb such strong sunlight. In a few more hours, once the dome was extinguished, the entire planet would be plunged into darkness. Black Gold Base would be flooded by the surging army of monsters. Whether it was mercenaries or laborers, none of the tens of thousands of people in the base would survive. They would be like the original creatures outside the barrier 20 years ago, all turned into skeletons, forming a sea of bones that stretched as far as the eye could see. They might not even have a single bone left. Ding Ming wasn't a person who was overflowing with sympathy, but when he thought about how there were so many people down there, he didn't feel good about it. Most of these laborers were low-class people who had suffered enough oppression and humiliation in their lives. Who would have thought that in the end, they would be buried in the mouths of these monsters? It was really a pity. Perhaps death was actually a good thing for them, because they would be truly free from this. Although Ding Ming knew the whole story, Vader had never seen such a terrifying scene from hell. He sat in the pilot's seat and shouted, "What's going on? What's going on? What's going on with these things? Where did they come from? How come I've never seen them before?" Ding Ming glanced at him and said indifferently, "Sir, you should concentrate on driving. I'm afraid we can't escape with this ship. We'll only have a way out if we change to another ship from the transport ship." Chapter 45. Trembling. Other than trembling, there was only trembling. This kind of earth-shattering tremor could even cause one's soul to tremble. The corpse in the darkness was also trembling. Suddenly, the corpse's fingers trembled slightly. As the tremors in the main mine grew stronger, the corpse's left hand finally moved. Julie let out a soft groan. She had finally woken up. Resurrecting an origin ability user wasn't difficult. Under normal circumstances, as long as the heart and brain weren't completely dead, the advanced medical cabin could generally save them. Julie obviously wasn't saved by the medical cabin. Her fatal wounds were in her neck and heart. But in reality, these two places weren't really fatal to her. After her throat was cut open, although a large amount of blood had spurted out, the Dark Abyss Ice Dust art had been activated in time to stabilize the circulation of energy and blood in her body, ensuring that the remaining life force wouldn't leak out. As for the heart, it was a fluke. If Julie had been in Marshall's place, Ding Ming's stab would have definitely taken her life. Because she was a woman who had maintained her figure quite well, her towering chest acted as a cushion and greatly weakened the strength of the stab, so it didn't completely damage her heart. This wasn't Ding Ming showing mercy or underestimating his opponent. If there was anything to blame, it was Ding Ming's fault for not seeing many women. In fact, Julie was the first woman he had ever wanted to kill. After all, certain parts of a woman's body were different from those of a man's. Ding Ming didn't know much about the structure of a woman's body. In fact, he didn't know much about women at all. Besides, Julie's Dark Abyss Ice Dust art didn't start from a heart. Otherwise, if the origin was destroyed, even the gods wouldn't be able to save her. At this moment, the experiment hall was shaking. Julie also felt that something was wrong. Such a large tremor definitely wasn't caused by an explosion. Based on her past experience, something must have happened on the ground. Thinking of this, she forced herself to turn on the wristwatch with her weak body and crippled right wrist. Her left hand trembled as she pressed on the screen. Ding Ming's file was quickly pulled up. She did not know where Ding Ming had run to. But there was one thing she was certain of. With Ding Ming's current strength, it was impossible for the general's men to stop him. As long as Ding Ming used some devious ideas, it would not be a problem for him to escape from Black Gold Base. Since he wanted to escape, the interstellar transport ship Black Gold No. 3, hovering in the sky, was a checkpoint that Ding Meng would not be able to bypass no matter what. Julie reluctantly pressed Command Center number 3 on the transmission bar of the hologram and decisively sent Ding Meng's message over. There is only one word in the message: memory. That was all she could do in her current condition. This was the limit of her ability. As for whether or not she could complete the mission, it was all up to fate. Black Gold number 3 interstellar transport ship. The central command hall was brightly lit. Hundreds of virtual screens were all lit up. On them were specific images of various parts of the starship. Dozens of holographic projectors were constantly generating all kinds of simulated objects and virtual maps. This was the detection system using multiple functions to automatically detect the situation inside and outside the starship to prevent any unexpected factors from occurring. At this moment, the solar eclipse had completely arrived. The planet below had completely sunk into darkness. Baines stared at the central screen and observed carefully. He could ignore the general and the others in the base, but Julie had not sent back any news. "Officer Baines, Miss Julie has sent an urgent message." A blonde woman beside him turned around and said. She was his right-hand woman. Baines waved his hand and said, "Connect it." A virtual image was quickly created on the workbench. Ding Meng's virtual image and data were all displayed. When he saw the word memory, Baines' expression changed. The blonde woman was already explaining. According to the information sent back by Miss Julie, this Ding Meng should have left the base on the ground. Baines pondered and said, "The base on the ground is not allowed to have ion flyers. If this Ding Meng wants to escape, he won't be able to go around our number 3 transport ship." The blonde woman immediately operated on the screen. According to the characteristics of the body scan, there isn't a single person on the ship that is similar to him. Baines frowned. "He's not on the ship?" The blonde woman said, "Theoretically, yes." Baines' gaze swept across the virtual screens and finally stopped at the connecting cabin outside the starship. It's not that he's not on the ship, it's that he didn't even get on the ship. The blonde woman was obviously very smart. She immediately understood what he meant. She continued operating on the screen and pulled up the database. In the 1 hour's time of departure, there are only 3 large ships that have left the port. They all belong to Shinda Aerospace's number 101 fleet. They're Type 6 swordfish transport ships. Their serial numbers are 703A, 703B, and 703C. Contact the captains of the 3 ships. I want them to appear in front of me immediately," Baines ordered. The order was quickly issued. In just 10 seconds, 3 remote holographic images appeared on the workbench. The first and second holographic images were of an old man with a wrinkled face and a handsome young man. The two of them asked almost in unison, "What's the matter?" "Captain Baines, why are you in such a hurry? What's the matter?" Baines' expression had already darkened. "Nothing. I just want to see if you're there." The 2 captains of Ship A and Ship B were indeed there. The problem was that the third holographic image did not produce a mirror image at all. It was full of static signal interference. It was obvious that Ship C's ion communication system had most likely been cut off. "Where's Captain Li Jia of Ship C?" Baines asked with a sullen expression. The 2 captains were stunned for a moment before they lowered their heads to ask. After about a minute, the young captain of Ship B raised his head with a serious expression. "Captain Baines, Ship 703C suddenly lost contact with us 20 minutes ago. According to our observations, Ship C changed its course without permission. It's currently heading in the direction of Nebula TCP-121 at a speed of 63,000 miles per hour. Its course is line 112 A2CD. As soon as he finished speaking, a huge 3-dimensional map of the galaxy quickly appeared on the central application. The countless lines, bright spots, and markings were very clear. The blonde woman pointed at Nebula TCP-121 marked on the map. "Captain Baines, that's the direction of the Norse Empire. If Ding Meng is on Ship 703C, then his current speed has already exceeded the 3rd cosmic speed. With the various configurations of the Type 6 swordfish transport ship, he can enter the observation range of the Norse Empire within a week. It'll be very difficult for Black Gold 3 to accurately locate and catch up to him. Baines was silent. Clearly, he was thinking of a solution. The memory chip was very important. The higher-ups were determined to get it and would not allow all their previous efforts to go to waste. If we can catch up to him as fast as we can, how long will it take? Baines asked. The blonde woman said, only Black Hawk 5A can catch up to him in 3 hours and 21 minutes if we act immediately. Baines fell silent again. The Black Hawk 5A was a Falcon attack spacecraft equipped with a weapon system. It could easily blast a civilian transport ship into pieces. If the memory chip were to be shattered as well, then everyone would be in deep trouble. Captain, time is of the essence. Please give the order quickly. The blonde woman reminded him. 10 seconds later, Baines finally said coldly, move out. Chapter 46. In a vast universe and the deep starry sky, a swordfish spaceship that resembled a giant shark was traveling at high speed in the colorful and brilliant Milky Way. This was Transport Spaceship 703C of Starship 101 of the Singda Aerospace Company. It was originally carrying a new batch of workers to the Black Gold Starship No. 3, but it was intercepted by Ding Meng and Vader at the connecting cabin of the spaceport. Vader first shut down the ship's communication system, and Ding Meng, who had followed behind, used his identity as a mercenary to close the exit, trapping more than 50 crew members in the connecting cabin. When the other two transport spaceships had completed the handover, 703C quietly followed them out of the port and successfully escaped from the transport spaceship. As for the captain, the first mate, and the second mate, they were mercilessly shot to death by Vader when they boarded the ship. Ding Meng did not care about this at all. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Sometimes the logic of survival was just that simple. If you don't die, then we'll die. There was no room for choice at all. On the other hand, Ding Meng did not kill the crew members who were trapped in the connecting cabin because these ordinary workers posed no threat to him at all. At this moment, the autopilot system had been activated. What Vader and Ding Meng had to do was to replenish their energy and physical strength in the spaceship's resting area. Looking at the stars flying past outside the cabin, Vader appeared to be deeply worried. His wife was still in the Federation, but he was heading in the direction of the Empire. He did not know when they would meet again. Perhaps it would be tomorrow, or perhaps there would never be a tomorrow. Ding Meng had already taken off his mercenary soft armor and changed into Singda's crew uniform. After enjoying 12 plates of sirloin steak, 21 salads, and 30 plates of seasonal vegetables, he finally put down his knife and fork in satisfaction. He also conveniently wiped out the 7 bottles of iced black tea on the table. In this era of advanced technology, delicacies were one of the most extravagant human indulgences. Think about it. The workers in the Black Gold Starship base used the cheapest industrial nutrient solution. Even ordinary human families usually used slightly better, highly polymerized compressed solutions. Once the lid of the test tube was lifted, they would raise their heads and take a mouthful. The entire process would take less than 10 seconds, and one's meal would be over. There was no joy in eating it all. Therefore, all kinds of delicacies were usually reserved for the rich. Ding Meng would never have thought that Singda Company's transport ship would have such good stuff hidden in it. After struggling on the edge of life and death for so many years, even if he could eat this meal, it was unknown whether there would be a next one. Not to mention that Origin ability users consumed a lot of energy, and beginner Origin ability users needed a lot of food to replenish their energy. Thus, there was no reason not to enjoy it. After enjoying the Western food, Ding Meng's attention was attracted by the control system of the spaceship. The central screen showed that out of the 1780 workers on the spaceship, only one of them was in use. In other words, there was only one worker in this batch. What kind of situation was this? Ding Meng was extremely curious. When he was first sent here, he was also in a hibernation pod. That was why he knew nothing about the outside world when he arrived at Black Gold Base. However, there was one thing that he could understand. The laborers were all inferior people, and the cabin provisions they usually received were pitifully little. Even the transportation companies would do anything to make use of them. Many people starved to death as soon as they stepped out of the cabin. It was too common. Since there's only one person, let's let him out and have a look. Ding Meng had no prejudice against laborers. They were all human beings, so why should they be treated differently? He was also born as a laborer. Vader had no objections to this at all. Even if he had objections, he would have none. Ding Meng was a ruthless character who could even kill Julie. If he wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as stretching out his hand. Soon, the door to the rest area opened automatically. A sloppy man in ragged clothes stumbled in. Looking at his posture, he was about to fall to the ground at any time. He was probably so hungry that he couldn't take it anymore. Ding Meng was too lazy to say anything. He pointed at the table not far away. There were still a few portions of steak on it that he hadn't finished. The man's eyes immediately lit up like a wild wolf that had seen fresh prey after being starved for many days. However, when he sat down at the table, it was as if he had become a different person. He became unusually calm. First, he straightened his back. Then, he carefully wrapped the napkin around his neck like a real gentleman. He picked up the bowl of borscht elegantly and took a small sip. Then he held a knife in his right hand and a fork in his left hand. He cut off a small piece of beef and put it into his mouth to slowly chew it. If one were to compare Ding Meng's table manners with his, then Ding Meng would be like a hungry dog pouncing on feces. He would rush up and tear, bite, gnaw, and chew, like a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds and sweeping away 1,000 soldiers. However, this person was like a true aristocrat. His every movement was solemn, elegant, and romantic. Even if he was a laborer, even if he was starving, the etiquette of Western food was so exquisite that even Vader was staring at him with his eyes wide open. It wasn't until the man slowly finished the plate of steak and regained some strength that he put down his cutlery and muttered, "What a pity! What a pity! What's a pity?" Ding Meng couldn't help but ask. The man sighed and said, "The environment here is barely passable. It's a pity that the steak is refrigerated and half done. Also, it's a pity that there's no red wine to accompany it. Most importantly, there's no fruit after the meal. This is not how Western food is eaten." Hearing his words, Ding Meng was so angry that he laughed. "You're already like a B** starred, and you still care about these things? Do you really think you're one of those rich and powerful people in the Federal Empire? What else do you want?" Ding Meng stared at him. The man didn't pay attention to him at all. He found a nearby sofa and sat down to rest. It looked like he was about to doze off. Ding Meng couldn't help but say, "I'm not a crew member." The man didn't even open his eyes. He just snorted softly as a response. Ding Meng continued, "I'm not from the refugee camp or the mercenary group either." This time, the man didn't even say him. It looked like he was about to fall asleep. Ding Meng said, "I'm also a laborer. I'm the one who let you out." The man finally opened his eyes and said calmly, "Then I'll thank you." He was saying thank you, but his tone, expression, and eyes didn't have the slightest bit of gratitude. It was as if Ding Meng was his servant and that it was his duty to do these things. However, Ding Meng wasn't angry at his arrogance. Instead, he found it very interesting. Look at him sitting on that sofa. He's just like the president of the Federation sitting on a spacious and comfortable sofa. He's so arrogant. It's as if he's forgotten that he's a laborer. Vader was also impressed. Even when he was giving orders at the exchange center, he wasn't as arrogant as this guy. However, now that they were on the run, Ding Meng couldn't be bothered to argue with this guy. After scanning the area with his telekinetic vision, he found that the man's threat level was basically zero. He also planned to sit down and take a nap. In fact, just as he sat down, the scruffy-looking man suddenly opened his eyes. "Right, we're the crew members of this ship." He finally asked a question that a normal person would ask. Ding Meng's eyelids drooped. "They're gone. Gone." The scruffy-looking man seemed very curious. "Why are they gone? If they're gone, they're gone. Unless you want to see them?" Ding Meng's answer was very direct. His words were as good as not saying anything. Unexpectedly, The scruffy-looking man nodded seriously. Yes, they're gone. Why do you have so many ridiculous whys? Ding Ming was speechless again. This guy made him completely speechless. The scruffy-looking man asked again, Excuse me, can I use the crew room? Ding Ming immediately became alert. What do you want? The scruffy-looking man answered seriously. I want to take a hot bath. My current appearance isn't very good. Ding Ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought to himself, it's not that your appearance isn't good, it's that you don't have an image at all. From another perspective, why would a coolie like you need an image? What's an image? Can it be eaten? Although he was grumbling in his heart, Ding Ming was still very magnanimous. He waved his hand and said, Go on. I won't take you there. Find your own way. No problem. The scruffy-looking man slowly stood up and walked towards the exit in a leisurely manner. However, before he could walk out of the lounge, he slowly walked back. Vader was very puzzled. Why did you come back again? The scruffy-looking man still had a serious expression on his face. I thought about it and decided that it's better not to take a bath. Why? Ding Ming was also quite puzzled. The scruffy-looking man said, Taking a bath is too damaging to one's vitality. It's not good for the body. This time, Ding Ming wanted to laugh, but he couldn't. As an origin ability user, I didn't even say that it was damaging to my vitality. You, an ordinary person, are talking to me about vitality? Unexpectedly, the scruffy-looking man stood up again not long after he sat down. Forget it. I still think that I need to take a bath. Ding Ming and Vader were both stunned. Why this time? The scruffy-looking man smiled embarrassedly. Compared to vitality, I still think that my personal image is more important. Ding Ming, Vader. Chapter 47. The sloppy man was quite fast. In less than 10 minutes, he had returned from the crew cabin. Not only had he taken a shower, but he had also shaved his entire face. He had even meticulously groomed himself. It was unknown where he had found a white shirt and a pair of black pants to wear. His entire person looked very spirited, especially his slightly parted hair, which suited his oval face very well. However, what Ding Ming admired the most was that this guy had even found a pair of leather shoes to wear. Under the illumination of the surrounding lights, the black leather shoes shone brightly. They were probably not ordinary goods. When the sloppy man returned to the lounge, it was as if he had returned to his own home. He looked around and revealed a satisfied smile on his face. Not bad. Only then did Ding Ming carefully size him up. The sloppy man wasn't actually a sloppy person. On the contrary, his facial features were very regular, and his face was very angular. Judging from his appearance, he belonged to the type that was truly handsome. The man didn't look very old, about 24 or 25 years old. In the era of origin ability, this age was considered young in the true sense of the word. The collar of his white shirt was slightly open, and the cuffs were rolled up to the middle of his arms, revealing his fair skin. Just by looking at his skin that was as smooth and white as a woman's, Ding Ming felt that this guy shouldn't be a laborer. No matter how he looked at it, this guy didn't look like an inferior, deformed person, nor did he look like someone who was born with a disability. Moreover, the man's figure was quite good. He was also tall, and he always had a smile on his face. If he could be categorized, then he could be described as sunny and handsome. If he could rely on this appearance and sense origin ability, he could at least become a second or third-tier male celebrity if he went to the big cities of the Federal Empire. Of course, this was Vader's opinion. Ding Ming didn't see it that way. What really attracted Ding Ming about this man was his pair of eyes. They were a pair of deep eyes. At first glance, they seemed to be full of smiles, but at first glance, they seemed to be somewhat melancholic. But second glance, you could feel a sense of vicissitudes within them. Of course, the most important thing was his temperament. A person's temperament could not be faked. When they were eating the steak earlier, the man gave off a funny vibe, as if he was putting on an act. But now that he had changed his clothes, Ding Ming felt that this man was really like a member of the upper class. Julie and the others did not consider themselves to be inferior, but that was based on the extreme exploitation of labor. However, This person was born with a sense of superiority that was a mixture of sunshine, elegance, and unruly, which left a deep impression on others. The scruffy-looking man apparently noticed that Ding Ming was looking at him. He smiled and walked over to greet him. "What do you think?" Ding Ming nodded. "I think your shoes are good. You really have good taste." The sloppy man gave him a thumbs up. "I just polished my shoes. Zebra brand. Not bad." Ding Ming could only continue to nod with drooping eyelids. "Yeah, not bad." The scruffy-looking man had already sat down on the sofa and was mumbling, "My head could be broken, but my hair cannot be messed up. Blood can flow, but my shoes must be polished. Even if I'm going to fight, I must maintain my style and not blow up." Little rascal couldn't help but pop up. TSK, this guy is a talent. You don't say. This guy is actually a little handsome. Ding Ming, you should learn from him and dress up properly. If you look like this now, I'm afraid that you'll still be a bachelor when you meet a beautiful woman in the future. Don't you agree, Ding Ming? Ding Ming, Ding Ming? Yeah, where is he? Ding Ming had already started to doze off on the sofa. The continuous days of training and fighting had made him extremely tired, and this was the perfect time to rest. Of course, he might not be able to rest properly even if he wanted to. In Ding Ming's perception, only about 10 minutes had passed before he was woken up by a strange movement on the sofa beside him. Vader had suddenly stood up. At this moment, the lights in the entire resting area had all turned red and were flashing. Furthermore, the alarm in the cabin had also started to buzz, 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 buzz. What's going on? Vader quickly rushed into the cockpit. The central console in the cabin had already automatically generated a three-dimensional map of space. The green dot representing 703C was currently traveling on a flight path, but there was a flashing red dot chasing after them on the same flight path. What's going on? Ding Ming followed him in. Vader's face was ashen. We seem to have been targeted. The people of Black Gold Base can chase us all the way here? Ding Ming expressed his doubts. Vader adjusted the screen beside him and pressed on the detection system to enlarge the image at the same time. Ding Ming could finally see it clearly. In the pitch-black darkness of space, a silver flying ship that looked like a war eagle was rushing towards them at high speed, just like an eagle catching its prey. Judging from the aggressive, swooping posture, it was obvious that they were not coming with good intentions. Vader's face was expressionless. This is the Black Eagle 5A Falcon flying ship from the Black Gold Interstellar Transport Ship No. 3. It's the only long-range attack ship on it. Ding Ming couldn't help but ask, "You've seen it before?" Actually, he shouldn't have asked this question. Not only had Vader seen it before, he had seen it too many times. He knew very well how powerful this flying ship was, and that it was definitely not something a civilian transport ship could withstand. Although the Swordfish was fast, it didn't have any weapons. At most, it had one or two thermal decoy machines installed to defend against interstellar pirates, commonly known as fake targets. Looking again at the various icons and data on the screen, Vader was resolute. It's an electronic scan. It's very likely that they've tracked us through thermal energy. We should be able to shake them off. As he spoke, he operated the screen. Soon, the giant steel plate at the bottom of the Swordfish transport ship opened, and a small ship identical in appearance to number 703C was released. This thing was a thermal decoy machine, which was usually used by civilian spaceships when they encountered interstellar pirates. The tail of the fake target spewed out an even more intense and dazzling crystal flame, and it flew forward at an even faster speed. Then, it made a big turn and flew off in a different direction. The principle behind this was actually quite simple. It would cause the pursuers behind to make the wrong judgment and follow the wrong target. After the fake target turned and flew off, the icons and data on the screen slowly returned to normal, gradually changing from a fiery red to a normal azure color. Vader let out a slight sigh of relief. That's good. We should have shaken them off. Before he could finish his sigh of relief, a new screen automatically rose from the control panel, indicating that new information had been transmitted. Even Ding Ming was aware of this operation. It was certain that the other party had completely ascertained his coordinates through ion detection and then forcibly connected to him. Sure enough, the rays from the sky descended, and the remote projection quickly synthesized Bane's image. Now, what a surprise, Officer Vader. You're actually on number 703C as well. Are you trying to escape to the Norse Empire? Baines looked to be about the same age as Vader, but his appearance was even more dignified than the Marshals. Presumably, he was used to giving orders. Seeing that Baines was actually personally piloting a spaceship to pursue them, Vader's hands and feet turned cold. Once he and Ding Meng fell into Baines' hands, he didn't know whether Ding Meng would be fine or not, but he would definitely be finished. He had seen the cruel methods Baines and the others used to deal with traitors, and he definitely didn't want to see a second time. He also didn't want to experience that feeling himself. Baines looked at Ding Meng. You must be Ding Meng. Ding Meng's face darkened, and he didn't answer. Saying anything now would be superfluous. Baines continued, I'll catch up to you in 20 minutes, so I'll give you 20 minutes to make the best choice in your life. If you take the initiative to stop and hand over the memory chips, I can guarantee your safety. If you continue to stubbornly drive forward, don't blame me for using some methods that even I don't want to use on you after I catch you. That will be unforgettable for the rest of your life. Mr. Ding Meng, I hope you can seriously consider my suggestion. I'll consider it. Ding Meng immediately turned off the instant communication. Vader looked at Ding Meng with a hint of gratitude. Ding Meng didn't compromise, which meant that he could still be saved. Once Ding Meng surrendered, it was basically announcing his impending death in advance. Ding Meng frowned. Is there any other way we can escape? Use the ion drive. We have to at least give it a try. Even Vader himself didn't have the confidence to answer this question. The Swordfish had an ion drive, but didn't the more advanced Falcon spaceship have one as well? Accelerating was just delaying the enemy's pursuit. It was just a final struggle before death. From another point of view, speeding up was hastening one's own demise. Chapter 48. In the depths of space, the tail of the Swordfish transport ship spat out blue crystal flames as it frantically fled forward, leaving a long tail in its wake. The air in the cockpit seemed to have frozen. It was so quiet that only the data reports from the various screens could be heard. The alarms were so loud that it was suffocating. Ding Meng opened a telepathic channel. Little rascal, do you have any ideas? Little rascal replied, I don't have any ideas either. Ding Meng, whether or not you can charge out will depend on you. Ding Meng couldn't help but smile bitterly. It was true that origin ability users were powerful, but they weren't powerful enough to contend against an assault ship. However, waiting for death wasn't a solution. Ding Meng could only secretly hide his claws on his wrists. If the other party forcefully boarded the ship, he would kill as many as he could. Even if he died, he would die calmly. He absolutely couldn't kneel and beg for mercy. He knew that begging for mercy was useless. His fate would be even more miserable if he did. Just based on the fact that he had killed Julie, there was no way the other party would let him go. The flowery words of these mercenary leaders were just a bunch of nonsense in his eyes. He never believed them. On the Falcon, the person personally piloting the ship wasn't Baines, but the blonde lady. At this moment, the tail of the Swordfish ship was clearly visible on the screen in front of her. She had seen too many low-level escape tricks like fake targets. They couldn't fool her at all. Officer Baines, should we launch an attack? The blonde lady asked. Baines replied, don't launch an attack for now. The memory chips can't be damaged in any way. We need to capture them alive. The blonde lady immediately operated. Start the magnetic interference program. Activate the ion force field. Prepare to board the ship. Target. Capture everyone on 703C alive. Baines nodded in satisfaction. Let's see how you can escape this time. On the Swordfish ship, Vader's head was dripping with cold sweat. The detection screen didn't need to be magnified. It was already very clear. The Falcon ship was right behind them and would catch up in at most 3 to 5 minutes. When that time came, a large number of mechas would be released, and everyone would be meat on the chopping board. Looks like you guys are in trouble. The sloppy man appeared at the cabin door and leaned lazily against it. It's not as if. It's happening. Dingming glanced at him. You don't look panicked at all. Why should I panic? The sloppy man walked over and looked at the detection screen. A smile appeared on his face again. Hee hee, it's the Falcon attack ship. I can't attract such a big trouble. Looks like they're not here to deal with me. I'm relieved. Vader glared at him fiercely. He thought to himself, how can you still be in the mood to make sarcastic remarks at a time like this? However, he had underestimated the scruffy-looking man's ability to make sarcastic remarks. I'm very curious. This Falcon flying ship has already flown so close. Why hasn't it opened fire? Dingming could not help but laugh. He was so angry that he laughed. Yeah, why didn't you open fire? Why are there so many ridiculous whys? The sloppy man stared at him. I think you're a thief. Dingming was curious. Why do you say that? The sloppy man said, you guys must have stolen something from them. They've caught up but haven't opened fire. I think they're trying to force their way onto the ship to capture you guys alive. Dingming was expressionless. You're really smart. That's for sure. The sloppy man was not modest at all. Let me tell you, I'm not just smart. Look at the formation behind us. They're definitely trying to fly up and use magnetic interference to disrupt the autopilot's flight path. They're going to fly in a straight line, then use the ion force field to fix their position and connect the two ships. Finally, they'll send Mecha up to deal with you guys. Vader looked at him with some surprise. This guy could actually see through something that even he could not guess. Dingming had an idea. Then, since you're so smart, is there any way to avoid it? Huh. The sloppy man laughed again. You want me to help you? Dingming laughed as well. That depends on whether you're smart enough. I've never had any interest in helping others. The sloppy man shook his head and looked like he was about to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, he turned back. However, since you treated me to steak, I have to show you what I'm capable of. Where's the eye of the command system? Where is it? Dingming hurriedly pointed at the mechanical screen on the workbench. The scruffy-looking man swaggered over and casually tapped on the virtual keyboard a few times. Then, the screen showed the most primitive data and code. Vader was still looking at him suspiciously when he saw the sloppy man's 10 fingers tapping at an unbelievable speed. At the same time, he was mumbling something. Releasing magnetic and force fields is based on signal transmission. In other words, their transmission command must be connected to our navigation channel. As long as we know their code, we can decode their transmission command. Simply put, if they can connect to us, we can also connect to them. He was still shaking his head. Vader was so anxious that he was about to pee himself. Looking out the side window, the ferocious face of the Falcon spacecraft was already visible to the naked eye. At this moment, the sloppy man's fingers tapped fiercely. Success! At the same time, in the command cabin of the flying ship, the entire cabin shook violently. Baines and the staff around him staggered and almost fell to the ground. What's going on? Baines asked sternly. The blonde woman's expression also changed. Officer Baines, our magnetic and force field signals have suddenly been cut off. Our speed has also weakened. I suspect that the other party has hidden hackers on board. Hackers were not a rare profession in this era. There were countless hackers active on the International Space Network, although they did not have as much power as Origin ability users. Their control over technology could still produce unexpected results. The Falcon spacecraft seemed to have been bewitched for a moment. Then, the Swordfish spacecraft shot out like an arrow, leaving the other party far behind in an instant. Vader's anxious expression immediately turned into pleasant surprise. I really couldn't tell that you were actually an expert. However, the sloppy man was not pleased with himself this time. Instead, his expression was solemn as he let out a long sigh. I have bad news to tell you. What bad news? Dingming and Vader asked in unison. The sloppy man pointed at the screen on the other side of the workbench. The screen did not turn red. Instead, it directly generated a new data model. A quantum probe has been transmitted. Dingming also understood this point. Compared to ionic energy, quantum energy was a more advanced and powerful force. In layman's terms, it was like the difference between an origin ability user and an origin ability warrior. As soon as he finished speaking, the remote projection appeared again. However, this time, the projection was not Bane's, but the projection of a military officer. Dingming only glanced at it. His intuition told him that this military officer was definitely not an ordinary human just by looking at his appearance and temperament. He was someone at the level of an origin ability warrior or above. The military officer had already begun speaking. This is the Norse Empire's interstellar patrol fleet, a transport ship of the Holy Grail Federation's Shingda Aerospace Company, Limited. You have approached Nebula TCP-121. This area is under the jurisdiction of the Empire. Please turn off your ion engines and take the initiative to approach the fleet. Enter the port for inspection. If you do not cooperate with the inspection, we will use force. F*CK. Ding Ming and Vader were both dumbfounded. How could they be so unlucky as to encounter the Empire's patrol fleet? The Norse Empire and the Holy Grail Federation had always been at odds with each other. If the Federation's spaceship fell into the hands of the Empire's fleet, even if it did not die, it would lose a layer of skin. Although Vader was in contact with the Empire, now that everyone was on the Federation's transport ship, it would be very troublesome to explain. They might not even be willing to believe him. However, the most dangerous thing was still Ding Ming. He did not have any citizenship at all. The Empire was different from the Federation. It was possible that the other party would treat him as a refugee and directly destroy him as a humanitarian. The sloppy man looked at Vader with a smile that was not a smile. See, you think you're so smart. You think you can run away by turning on the ion drive. In the end, you caused too much of commotion and attracted even more vicious things. Hee, now we're all done for. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.